Chapter 21, Beedrill Leader, First Update. That single green qualified Pokemon egg was enough to make Aoki's expedition extremely profitable. The two yellow qualified eggs nearby would have been worth taking as well. Their parents had excellent aptitude, but he couldn't carry everything. Yellow qualified Pokemon were already rare. Green qualified ones were exponentially more valuable. With Murkrow's help, Aoki carried the egg back to the surface and slipped away before the Beedrill swarm returned. They didn't retrace their steps. Aoki and Murkrow skirted the forest from a different direction to avoid the returning Beedrills. He had originally planned, after slipping past them, to destroy the nest. If the Beedrills suddenly lost their home, they'd be forced into chaos, rebuilding and searching for enemies, giving him time to pick them off bit by bit. But finding a green qualified egg changed his plan. It was worth taking the risk. What he didn't realize was that stealing the egg would cause a far greater upheaval than burning the hive. Far ahead, the Beedrill leader suddenly felt a sharp emptiness, as if something precious had been taken. It thought at once of the 3 eggs in the nest and shuddered. Frenzy built beneath its compound eyes. "Buzz! Buzz!" it roared, and the forest fell silent at the sound. Without hesitation, it darted back toward the hive, its wings beating in a blur. The rest of the swarm followed as best they could, but their leader flew faster than any of them. When the leader reached the hive and found only 2 eggs left where 3 had been, an animal madness filled it. Rage flared, killing intent poured from its whole body. The Beedrills that arrived later saw their leader's distress and were seized by the same frantic despair. For the swarm, the leader was everything. Its superior breeding aptitude lifted the whole colony's chances. To have the leader's best qualified offspring taken was like snuffing out the swarm's future. Then, in the leader's mind, a single image formed, a small, completely black Pokemon and a human beside it. The leader's intuition as a parent told it the thief's identity. It let out a long, furious cry. All the Beedrills turned, eyes locking on their leader like soldiers awaiting orders. Wings vibrated, figures blurred, and the leader flew out, following the faint scent of the stolen egg. The whole swarm streamed after it. As the Beedrills poured out of the nest, the forest stirred. Any nearby Pokemon that detected the frenzied swarm hurriedly cleared the area. Even cautious species were stampeded into retreat by the surge of anger and purpose flowing through the Beedrills. The swarm followed Aoki's path and soon approached Metapod territory, stopping at its border. Butterfree were the Beedrill's greatest rivals across the forest, sometimes the targets of conflict, sometimes merely uneasy neighbors, but the two swarms generally coexisted. Butterfree were gentle and would not provoke Beedrills unless forced, and the Beedrills didn't want to pick a fight with another species that could reproduce in similar numbers. Now, however, the Beedrill leader ignored all propriety. Smelling the egg's scent coming from the opposite territory, it charged straight into Butterfree airspace. A Butterfree leader rose from the swarm with a warning cry, but 2 Beedrills swooped in to block it. The Butterfree hadn't fully gathered. They were outnumbered and unprepared. The Beedrills, burning with rage, attacked with savage ferocity, and over a dozen of them punched through the Butterfree defenses. The leader was the first to break through and flew deeper into Butterfree territory. Meanwhile, Aoki and Murkrow were at a small campsite in the Metapod region. The green qualified egg lay wrapped in a bundle of leaves on the ground. Murkrow was halfway through an energy cube. Aoki, leaning back with his hands behind his head, had forgotten an important detail. In a previous life, he had reached near Elite Four status, and in Team Rocket, he no longer had to personally secure resources. He'd grown careless. He hadn't properly masked the egg's scent, only wrapped it in leaves now, too late to hide the trail the Beedrills could follow. Murkrow paused mid-bite, cocking its head. Its instincts prickled. Danger was coming. Aoki sat up and asked, "Murkrow, what is it?" A faint buzzing answered him. Aoki's expression sharpened as he looked north. A yellow shape darkened the horizon, followed by a dozen smaller ones. "Beedrill," he said. He'd been dealing with them for 2 days and recognized the swarm at once. "They really followed us all the way here. Looks like I hit a raw nerve." Murkrow, who had always wanted the chance to face the leader, grew excited. It paid little mind to the ordinary Beedrills clustered around the leader. This was the opponent it had been waiting for. Aoki grinned. The Beedrills had paid a high price in numbers to chase them here, but a dozen or so now wouldn't scare them. As the leader sniffed the air and locked onto their scent, the swarm saw the two familiar figures and surged forward without hesitation. "Murkrow, get ready to battle," Aoki said quietly. "Caw!" Murkrow cried, launching into the air. "Use Tailwind first," Aoki instructed. "Get up high, then take out the injured ones. Keep the leader occupied while we deal with the rest. I want you and the leader to have that one-on-one after." Murkrow instantly created a rush of wind. Tailwind lifted it and sharpened its speed. Once aloft, it adapted to the situation. A gust of wing-borne energy coalesced, and it unleashed a powerful gust to form a wind wall, slowing the Beedrill leader's advance. Then, with precise strikes, Murkrow dived in with repeated pecks, battering several already injured Beedrills until they could no longer fight. The Beedrill leader pushed through the gust, but 6 healthy Beedrills circled in and drove at Murkrow. Their twin needles gleamed as they struck in a flurry of fury attacks. Murkrow, caught between its old limits and the new power Tailwind had given it, darted and dodged in midair, but 2 of the needles found their mark. As the skirmish moved uphill, Aoki tapped into his scanner and pulled up the leader's data. Pokemon Beedrill, light green, gender, female, level 17, type bug poison, ability swarm. Held item, leader's aura, can increase a Pokemon's qualification by 1 minor tier. Egg moves, Bug Bite, Pin Missile. Basic moves, Twineedle, Fury Attack, Rage, Pursuit. Tutor moves, Drill Run, Agility. TMZMs, none. Leader's Aura, an ability only leader Pokemon could wield. It could raise another Pokemon's qualification and drew the trust of similar members of the swarm. Aoki clicked his tongue under his breath as he scrolled through the Beedrill leader's data. He had his own suspicions about the leader's status, but he hadn't expected it to possess a leader's aura. Even in his previous life, after half a lifetime as a Pokemon hunter and having climbed to the level of a quasi-Elite Four, he had only encountered a leader's aura twice. It was a broken ability. It could directly raise a Pokemon's potential by a small tier. Coupled with absolute control over its colony and preferential access to resources, a Pokemon with a leader's aura usually accomplished great things. Pokemon potential, Aoki thought, was commonly divided into 7 colors: red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and purple. Each color could be subdivided into 3 shades. The Beedrill leader's potential registered as light green, just barely in the green tier, so there was a big gap between it and a darker green. Murkrow's potential was green too, but noticeably darker, almost dark green. Without special items, it might never reach dark green. The Beedrill leader's original potential should probably have been dark yellow, but the aura had lifted it into light green. That meant the newly stolen Weedle egg with green potential was the highest potential offspring in the whole colony. Properly raised, it could become the colony's strongest, and even raise the colony's average. No wonder the leader had been furious when it discovered its best child missing, and no wonder the entire colony had erupted in outrage. Aoki had shaken the Beedrill colony's foundation in a way worse than slaughtering large numbers of Kakuna. Those thoughts flicked through his mind in an instant. Meanwhile, Murkrow had knocked down one of the already injured Beedrill, but had taken a few hits itself. Not serious, but worrying. "Caw!" Murkrow screamed, its cry sharp enough to unsettle the nearby Beedrill. 2 even went into flinches. Flying energy gathered between its wings, and with a firm flap it unleashed Gust. The howling whirlwind wrapped itself around Murkrow and the surrounding Beedrill. Gust, strong against bug types, battered the attackers. Murkrow kept flapping to intensify the gust and to block the Beedrill leader outside the wind. One by one, the Beedrill caught in the whirl were thrown out and collapsed motionless. When the last Beedrill dropped, Murkrow's wings stilled, and the whirlwind faded with a muffled roar. Only Murkrow and the Beedrill leader remained, floating face to face. The leader lost patience first. It flashed forward in a white streak, stingers poised. Quick attack. "Murkrow peck," Aoki ordered. Murkrow's eyes narrowed. A white shine flashed along its beak as it charged with flying energy. The two collided, bounced apart, and for a moment both flew backward. The Beedrill's body distorted, and an angry blaze flared, the sign of fury attack, taking a hit and growing angrier, its power rising. Aoki ignored the burst of fury. As long as Murkrow kept its distance, it would hold the advantage. Murkrow, keep Tailwind up and use Gust, Aoki said calmly. After the clash, they widened the gap. Murkrow formed another gust and sent it roaring toward the Beedrill. Furious, the leader charged straight through the whirlwind, stingers slashing, fury swipes, tearing the wind apart. Murkrow stared for a second as the Beedrill ripped through its gust and then reappeared, quick attacking again. Murkrow, don't space out, astonish, Aoki barked. Beedrill's twin stingers landed and Murkrow shrieked in pain, then stunned the attacker with astonish and slipped away. The pattern repeated. Murkrow kept its distance with Gust. The Beedrill burst through, struck with stingers, then backed off. After 7 or 8 exchanges, Murkrow's muscles ached, its wings heavy. Even its legs felt numb. The Beedrill was panting too. That it could survive so many gusts, so effective against bug types, and still keep fighting showed how strong a colony leader it was. It had light green potential and the build of a leader Pokemon. Though 3 levels higher than Murkrow, it couldn't match Murkrow's speed or type advantage, and Aoki continued to give the right orders. Murkrow, roost, he said. Both sides were slowing. Endurance would decide the winner. Murkrow landed, legs wobbly, almost losing its balance. Roost took hold. Earthly energy flowed up through its feet, warming and restoring sensation and strength as the numbness ebbed. The Beedrill didn't understand why its foe had suddenly landed, but its battle sense did. Its opponent was recovering while it was weakening. It couldn't allow that. Deciding to interrupt the roost, the Beedrill struck, but it was already tired. Its speed had fallen since the start, and it no longer had the stamina for frequent quick attacks. When it finally reached Murkrow, Murkrow's roost ended and its eyes snapped open, burning with fighting spirit. Even as an adversary, Murkrow felt respect for the Beedrill. Aoki had come to know the crow's nature over time. Seeing those eyes, Aoki only shook his head with a small smile. Murkrow, do as you want. Caw, Murkrow cried, wings whipping as it charged without dodging. The Beedrill, drained and mechanical, could only strike back without finesse. Flesh met flesh, wings struck body, the impact echoing in the air. The Beedrill's strength faded, the fury in its eyes dimmed. Murkrow's respect showed on its face as well. With one final fierce beat, Murkrow slammed its wings into the Beedrill's chest. The expected counter never came. The Beedrill crashed to the ground, unconscious. Its chest had not been able to withstand that last blow. Murkrow hovered, blinking. It had won. Caw! Caw! It cried out, thrilled. The first opponent to give it such a satisfying fight and the strongest it had defeated so far. Aoki walked over slowly, looked down at the fallen Beedrill, and exhaled in relief. He'd trusted Murkrow, but seeing the enemy truly down finally eased his nerves. Then the chip in his mind chimed as he watched Murkrow level up. He hadn't expected it to gain a level from this battle. The scanner traced the crow's vitals and displayed the readout. Pokemon Murkrow, green, gender male level 15, type dark flying. Ability Prankster, lets it use status moves first. Held item, neg moves, punishment, sucker punch, roost base moves, peck, astonish, pursuit, haze, wing attack tutor moves, snatch, tailwind, TM, HM, none. Murkrow had reached level 15 and learned wing attack, a 60 power flying move, its strongest flying attack so far. After the excitement, Murkrow swayed. The after effects of roost and the accumulated strain from the fight left it nearly spent. Aoki caught the staggering Murkrow, smiling with a mix of exasperation and affection. He tapped the crow gently on the head. Don't be reckless next time. You've got to deal with the consequences, he said, half scolding, half proud. Murkrow was exhausted and unable to battle further, but it had beaten a formidable opponent, and Aoki was satisfied. Gently placing Murkrow on the ground, I pulled out the emergency reserve of healing spray and carefully treated each of its wounds. The spray felt cool where it touched, and the worst of the pain eased. After a moment, a sharper sting returned, signs of disinfection doing its work. Murkrow hissed, equal parts comfort and irritation, until the bottle was empty. After eating some energy cubes, it slowly regained control and pushed itself upright. Aomori stopped it from taking off and picked it up. With Murkrow's current weight, it was still a bit of a strain. At the border between the Butterfree and Beedrill territories, the air reeked of battle. Beedrill and Butterfree lay dead on the ground, on the trees, in the underbrush, and among withered leaves. The Beedrill swarm had begun the fight with the advantage, but the tide had turned as waves of Butterfree returned from all directions. With their leader gone and the Butterfree leader still fighting on the field, the Beedrill suffered far worse losses. As kin fell, the normally gentle Butterfree grew enraged and struck without mercy, tilting the casualty count even further against the Beedrill. When Murkrow felled the Beedrill leader, something shifted. All at once, the Beedrill froze, as if some force that had been driving them vanished. A few took hits from nearby Butterfree and were rendered incapable of continuing, and still the survivors roared, aching in a way that wasn't just physical. "Buzz, buzz, buzz!" they cried, confused, grieving. Their leader had been their anchor. With it gone, they were adrift. A handful of Beedrill went berserk, trying to smash through the Butterfree lines, but collapsed halfway. Then one noticeably stronger Beedrill stopped its cries and rallied the others. It called, and the swarm snapped back as if doused with cold water. The despair in their eyes faded, replaced by a kind of grim resolve, and under that lead, Beedrill, they began a slow, disordered retreat. Fewer than 100 returned, the rest lost. If anyone had watched closely, they would have seen a faint, coiling aura building around the leader, a proto-aura, the first stirrings of a leader's presence. When a tribe's cohesion reaches a certain point, this aura can form. If it condenses further, it can become a true leader's aura. The Butterfree gathered their dead and withdrew into the trees, and the brutal clash finally ended. It took nearly 3 hours for Murkrow to recover fully from using Roost, even with the help of energy cubes, which proved how taxing the move was. Roost was powerful, but it couldn't be spammed or treated like a regular skill. At Aomori's insistence, Murkrow didn't train that day. Instead, he massaged its wounds and helped it restore itself. By dawn, Murkrow was whole again. Aomori prepared breakfast beneath a tree, while Murkrow, 2 thick pieces of wood tied to its wings, dove and wheeled around the large trunk, circling again and again. Their close fight with the Beedrill leader had exposed weaknesses. Murkrow had learned wing attack and now needed stronger wings. After leveling up, its body had grown subtly tougher. Where it would once have been exhausted after 100 circuits, it now still had energy left. After a short rest and another handful of energy cubes, Murkrow untied the wood, landed, and started hammering the tree with practice strikes. Aomori joined in, sprints up the hillside, then sit-ups and push-ups. The body was most receptive in the morning. By midday, both trainer and Pokémon lay panting on the grass, looking up at the clear blue sky, feeling their bodies and minds unwind. After lunch, they set out again. It was the 6th day. Tomorrow, the rocket team would convene. Passing back by the battle-scarred border, Aomori stared at the devastated forest. He hadn't meant to trigger a war. A single reflex had cascaded into something brutal. The losses were plain to see. Even in the Butterfree territory, the Metapod that had once hung in every tree were gone, and the occasional Butterfree had dwindled. Both tribes had paid dearly. He'd been hardened by past life hardships. This world was dog-eat-dog. Without strength, survival was no one's concern. He'd long since abandoned useless pity. Apart from a few close people and his Pokémon, he trusted no one and granted mercy to no one. Mercy, he thought, belonged to the weak. In his previous life as a Pokémon hunter, he'd witnessed slaughter far worse than this. Weakness, he'd learned, was the original sin. The Beedrill forest felt familiar, but hollow. No Kakuna clung to the branches now. "I hope you're sensible enough not to cause me trouble," Aomori muttered under his breath. With their leader gone, the Beedrill were scattered and posed little threat. They could be picked off one by Murkrow if needed. The forest that once required careful passage was crossed now with little caution. The trip in took nearly 2 hours. The return took only 1. Not a single Beedrill challenged them, as if the entire tribe had folded in on itself. Aomori was quietly satisfied. As they neared the outer reaches of the forest, signs of Pokémon life reappeared. The route back matched the way there. When they passed the site of the smaller skirmish, only faint bloodstains marked the ground. At the Zubat cave, Aomori collected everything he'd stashed there and tucked it into his storage belt. He'd planned only a brief exploration, but it had stretched into days and yielded much. This area sat at the border between the forest's outer and inner regions. Wild Pokémon here weren't high level enough for Murkrow anymore. Even without treasure hunting, Aomori guessed he'd have given up within a day or two. There were no signs of activity inside the cave now, though faint tracks suggested 3 or 4 groups of Pokémon had lingered outside. Perhaps the Zubat's presence had been enough to keep others from entering, leaving the cave's berries untouched. Those berries were redundant to Aomori at this point, but he left them where they were. Better to have them than not. In a few days, some other Pokémon would likely move in. He left the cave without a backward glance. This place was a minor stop in their journey, important perhaps, but not life-defining. The island itself, where the rocket team had dragged so many children for their trials out of sight of the world, was clearly more than some insignificant atoll. Pokémon here weren't especially high level, but their aptitudes skewed higher than usual. Within a single Beedrill tribe, Aomori had found 2 green aptitude specimens, and yellow and orange aptitudes showed up more often than they would outside. This felt like one of Team Rocket's secret islands. What secrets it truly held, even someone who had reached pseudo-Elite Four strength in a past life wouldn't necessarily be privy to. By dusk, they reached the rocket team base. The entrance yawned before them like a man-eating maw, swallowing anyone who entered. Aomori tightened his grip on the Weedle egg that hung on his back, then slipped into the shadows and merged with the night. Chapter 24, Return to the Exchange, Second Update. After passing through the long entrance and stepping back into the base, Aomuki felt the space open up around him. The place looked largely unchanged from when he had left. The only difference was that the crowds were thinner, and the emptiness gave the whole area a hollow, neglected feel. Some people who had gone out probably hadn't returned yet. Tomorrow was the real test. If it hadn't been for the precious Pokémon egg strapped to his back, Aomuki wouldn't have come back so early. Compared to living in the wild, the base was more comfortable and far safer. A trainer finishing up in a corner paused and brightened when he saw Aomuki, hurriedly wrapping things up and slipping away with his Pokémon. Aomuki noticed him in passing, but paid little mind, assuming the trainer was weak and dependent on others to survive. He walked straight toward the exchange center, passing groups of 2 or 3 people. Each time someone caught sight of him, they looked briefly doubtful, then surprised, and at the same time, a little smug. In the special accommodation area for trial participants, in one room larger than the others, a young man sat in the center with a smile, running his hand over the scales of an Arbok coiled beside him. Around him sat about 8 people with their Pokémon, silent, cautious, unwilling even to meet the young man's eyes. Guga, boss, he's back. A man burst in through the doorway and ran up. When he reached Guga, all the words he'd been ready to say froze in his throat and bubbled out as a single sentence. The man in the middle was Guga, the first-place winner of the previous test. By all expectations, he would take first place in the final trial as well. At the mention, Guga's smile faded, and he sat up, eyes sharpening as he stared at the messenger. The Arbok beside him straightened too, tongue flicking, its narrow eyes sharpening with a predatory light. The messenger swallowed hard, feeling like a knife had been pressed against his skin by Guga's gaze and the snake's stare. "Yes, he's back," he stammered. Guga relaxed and sank back into his chair, and the Arbok uncoiled. Still, the messenger felt colder than before. "As I thought, someone I've been keeping an eye on. He stayed out that long and came back alive. Heh." Guga's laugh had none of warmth. One of the men seated near the front, a solidly built youth of 17 or 18, rose up. "Guga, boss, he only got second by cheating a little trick. Send me, I'll bring him to you." He started to turn as if to leave. Guga stopped him with a casual hand. "Shito, no, I want to see how he does tomorrow." His smile was casual, almost amused. Shito sat back down, muttering agreement. Ray. In truth, he only pretended to be eager. If asked to risk his life for Guga, he wouldn't. He was shrewd beneath his rough exterior. Guga's followers hadn't gathered by accident. Strength mattered here, but even more important was ruthlessness. Guga had made a reputation for himself by crushing anyone who opposed him, killing their Pokémon, and making them watch as their companions were fed to his Arbok. That kind of cruelty, backed by real ability, drew followers fast in a place like this. In a cannibalistic environment where only 50 people would survive the trial, the weak were weeded out relentlessly. Attaching yourself to the strong was the only real chance of survival. The trial itself was a talent pipeline for the rocket team. Everyone who survived would be offered positions and important roles later on. It was a purgatory and a ladder at once. Survive, and you might climb into power. For members of the Alliance, the normal paths could still lead to comfortable lives even without extraordinary success. But for those from common families or crushing poverty, people like Aoki, this trial might be the only chance. Aoki had lived in the slums his whole life, sifting through trash for food, which was why he had been so thin when he first arrived on the island. Guga, by contrast, had originally come from privilege. His older brother was a rocket team captain, a man who had risen through the same trial. Using his brother's connections, Guga had slipped into the participant pool and gotten himself transferred to the island. Through payoffs and favors, he'd also acquired an arbok of exceptional potential, the signature species of his brother, and had trained it with the skill his family's experience provided. The result was power hardened with cruelty, and followers came. Guga lounged at the head of the room, his eyes roaming over the men and women gathered there, mentally cataloging who might become the core of his future team within the rocket team. He wanted more than just to exist. He wanted to rise. His minimum ambition was to outdo his brother, to become an executive in the rocket team and then push further. Whenever he thought of that future, the corners of his mouth lifted into a sinister smile. Aoki, already inside the exchange center, had no awareness of the plotting in Guga's room, and even if he had known, wouldn't have cared. He had gone through this once before and had one goal now: become stronger. Anyone who stood in his way would be destroyed. In his previous life, he'd been one of Guga's underlings, powerless to investigate or challenge him. This time, he'd activated his chip early and believed he would not be defeated. He untied the cloth bundle at his shoulder and placed the small egg, a Weedle egg, gently on the counter. The exchange clerk's surprised look was obvious. Aoki had decided to trade the egg for points. The Pokemon inside would likely have good potential once hatched, and as a bug type, would grow quickly into a useful fighter. Still, he chose to give it up. It was just an egg. He didn't know when it would hatch. If it hatched near the end of the trial, it would be worthless to him. Even if it hatched soon and he trained it successfully, only one Pokemon could be used in the final battle. Raising an egg into a useful fighter would demand resources and time he could not afford. Worse, Beedrill, the egg's final evolution, had a short lifespan. Just when a Beedrill became truly formidable, its body would start to decline. And though Beedrill could theoretically mega-evolve, Megastones were rare. The Alliance itself barely knew about mega-evolution, and the odds of obtaining the exact one for Beedrill, the Beedrillite, were effectively nil. Taking all that into account, Aoki wanted points now, resources that would immediately strengthen his Murkrow and help him prepare for the trial. Without looking up from the egg, he said calmly to the clerk, "I want to exchange this for points." Chapter 25, Trading a Pokemon Egg, update a little late, sorry. "Are you sure?" the exchange clerk asked, sounding more bemused than curious as he looked at Aomori like he'd lost his mind. Aomori only nodded. Pokemon eggs may be uncommon in the wild, but they're not impossible to find. Still, most people toss them aside instead of bringing them in to be evaluated and exchanged for points. If a Pokemon bonds with its trainer from the moment it hatches, that relationship tends to be much stronger, and eggs with the same innate aptitude can be worth more than already hatched Pokemon. The problem is that you can't tell an egg's true aptitude until it hatches. The Alliance scientists long ago made portable devices that can measure a Pokemon's aptitude, but the egg versions of those machines are bulky and expensive to operate, consuming precious materials. Unless an egg's pedigree is already known, most people won't bother testing it. Even a 1 in 10,000 yellow aptitude egg is unlikely to draw attention from those who can afford the analysis. Aomori didn't want to explain any of that. He certainly didn't want to say he had a chip that indicated the egg might be green aptitude. That would have raised alarms at the base, especially with the Venom coach around. "Have you thought it through? Testing an egg costs 100 points. A beginner aptitude egg is only worth 100 points. If you don't have enough points, the clerk trailed off. Omori's nod this time was resigned. Team Rocket didn't do credit. If you couldn't pay, you were out of luck. No favors, no leniency. He couldn't just hand the egg over untested. An unchecked egg would be graded red aptitude and recycled as a single point. That would be a crime against value. The clerk finally shrugged and began the procedure. He set the egg into the instrument's concave cradle, sealed the transparent cover, took a vial from the shelf, and poured the analysis fluid into the machine's port. The liquid had been formulated by Alliance scientists. It was costly to produce, which explained the testing fee. He pressed start. The device thrummed to life. A row of lights blinked on. The lowest light, no aptitude, flared up first. Every egg would trigger that. A moment later, the second light came on, beginner aptitude. The chip Aomori carried had already shown orange. Now the machine confirmed it. Your luck's not bad. It's at least beginner aptitude. You won't have to worry about being unable to pay the fee, the clerk said, smiling. Aomori only shrugged. Orange was ordinary. The test continued. As the beginner light steadied, the third light, the one for intermediate aptitude, began to flicker, then glow. The clerk's expression shifted from mild amusement to surprise. Intermediate aptitude in an egg was rare, and it meant the exchange value jumped significantly, usually into the thousands. For a participant in the trials, 1,000 points could be a game changer. The indicator cycled through the intermediate tiers, lower, middle, upper, growing steadily brighter. Then, to the clerk's disbelief, it held at the top of the intermediate band and did not stop. Faint sparks began to appear in the advanced light segment. Add advanced aptitude? It's reached advanced aptitude, the clerk blurted, then quickly clamped a hand over his mouth. The astonishment still showed in his eyes. Team Rocket staff knew the value of advanced aptitude. Tens of thousands of points, often snatched up immediately by captain-level members, sometimes even tempting executives. An advanced aptitude egg was worth more than a wild Pokémon of the same rank that had already been trained. In the exchange system, it could overturn the balance of the whole trial. Aomori frowned at the clerk's involuntary gasp. This was a trial. If word spread that he'd just acquired tens of thousands of points, he'd become a target. Competitors might unite to bring him down and divide the spoils. He could already imagine being singled out as the biggest obstacle to someone gunning for first place. The clerk noticed his loss of composure and tried to compose himself. It was late and the exchange room was empty. Otherwise, the reaction might have been catastrophic for a young man in Aomori's position. Still, when the testing device finally finished, the advanced light shone solid and stable. The screen read, Advanced Mid-Tier Aptitude, Weedle. The clerk hesitated. "I'm sorry," he said at last. "I don't have the authority to process advanced aptitude eggs. Please wait." He slipped away through a concealed door, closing it behind him. After a short time, the hidden door opened again. The clerk returned, bowing and holding the door open. From within emerged a figure wrapped head to toe in a black robe. The person moved slowly, deliberately, like an elderly man making measured steps. He approached the counter without hurry. Aomori watched him come, every muscle tensing. The last thing he wanted was to draw attention in the middle of the trials. But there was no denying what the device had reported. A mid-tier green Weedle in an egg was a prize that could change everything. The mysterious stranger glanced at the Pokémon egg in the tester and at the light that marked its high potential. With a voice as flat as steel, he asked, "How did you get this egg?" There was an undeniable edge to the question. "Reporting, my lord," Aoki said respectfully, not daring to lie. "I found it in a Beedrill nest. It should be the offspring of the Beedrill leader. I'm willing to offer this Pokémon egg as a welcome gift." Although he hated parting with it, he knew he had no choice. The stranger nodded once, satisfied. He waved a hand. "No need to refuse a kid like you. That Weedle egg is worth about 18,000 points. Give him 20,000 points and charge it to my account." Part of the remark was for Aoki. The rest was directed at the exchange clerk, standing ready. "Yes, sir," the clerk said, bowing quickly. Aoki remained bowed and silent. The stranger stared at him for a long second, then asked, "You're capable. Would you be interested in doing something for me?" Aoki took a steadying breath. "It would be an honor to serve you, my lord. Find me after your test." He set a small black badge on the counter as he spoke. Aoki glanced at it out of the corner of his eye and froze. When he recognized the emblem, he could only nod. The stranger gave one more look at the bowed boy, then slipped through a hidden door. Someone would take care of the Weedle egg. He didn't need to worry about that. When the door closed, the operator who'd been standing by let out a long breath and wiped his brow. Aoki allowed himself a quiet sigh as well. Under the looks of envy and curiosity from the other staff, he picked up the black badge and turned it over in his hand. It was shaped almost like a cloud, utterly black and unmarred, the Black Cloud Badge. It belonged to Shadow, the rocket team's highest secret unit. Shadow answered directly to Giovanni. Only Giovanni, the Shadow leader, and the two vice leaders could authorize such a badge. Shadow wasn't part of the rocket team's regular structure. Every member was personally chosen by those three leaders. All three leaders were elite 4-level trainers, so the stranger earlier had to be one of them. Even as a reserve badge, the meaning was enormous. Complete the task the stranger would give him, and he could join Shadow. Because Shadow reported straight to Giovanni, membership effectively elevated a person one rank above their rocket team standing. A Shadow grunt ranked above a regular rocket team grunt, closer to a squad leader. Rumors about Shadow always circulated within the ranks. Aoki had heard them in his previous life, but had never actually seen proof, until now. Why me? Is it just because of that egg? He wondered, frowning. There was no reason to hand him a reserve badge on a first meeting, and with his current strength he shouldn't have attracted attention, especially given that he was only here as a trialist. If he hadn't been reborn, he wouldn't even have known what this badge meant. Suppressing his questions, he hid his curiosity behind a puzzled expression and asked, "Excuse me, this badge." The exchange clerk immediately brightened. "I can't tell you anything about it. You'll have to wait for that esteemed person to explain." Aoki nodded and said no more. He slipped the badge into his storage. Despite the morning's strange turn, he hadn't forgotten his original purpose. The Weedle egg had bought him 20,000 points, far more than he'd expected. 20,000 points. How many useful things could he trade for with that? Apart from a few important figures on the island, he guessed he might have more points than nearly anyone. But points meant nothing until they were turned into strength. He opened the exchange catalog and skipped past the cheap items to the TM section. He'd already decided what Murkrow needed. Its speed was excellent, and with Tailwind, could be pushed even further. As a dark flying type, its flying moves were strong, likely honed by its many battles against bug types, but its dark type offense was lacking. Murkrow's strongest natural talent had always leaned dark, yet many of its best dark moves required higher levels to learn. To boost Murkrow's dark type damage, Aoki wanted to pick up a few dark TMs. There was another issue. Despite Murkrow's speed, its frail body was a problem. In the fight with the Beedrill leader, Murkrow's glass-like durability had shown itself. If it met something as fast but much more powerful, it could be knocked out in a single hit. In group fights, it would become an easy target for focused attacks. So defensive options were a priority. Luckily, Murkrow's hidden ability, Prankster, made its status moves act first, an excellent trait he needed to exploit. It would be a waste not to. Then he remembered the silver-white box he'd dug up with the treasure map. He pulled it from his storage belt. The unknown TM inside might be a free win. He set the box on the counter and asked the now helpful clerk, "Could you check what move this is?" The clerk opened the box with a curious expression. Seeing the TM, his face betrayed a mix of surprise and approval. He placed the TM on the move teaching machine. A message appeared on the screen so Aoki could read it too. Move, Screech, type, normal, category status. Description, emits an ear-piercing sound that greatly lowers the target's defense. Screech. Aoki's heart leapt. It wasn't as rare as Protect or Substitute, but Screech was far from common, and it was perfect for Murkrow. Screech could drastically cut an opponent's defense, and with Prankster Murkrow, could get it off first. He'd already planned to spend points on status moves. This TM had just saved him a lot. The clerk muttered to himself, "What a lucky kid." And Aoki couldn't help but smile. He felt certain that with this addition, Murkrow's combat ability would advance at least one level. Chapter 27, Skill Exchange, First Update. Aoki focused again on the exchange catalog, searching for the skills he needed. I want to exchange for these two, he said, pointing to the entries. The catalog read, Skill, Protect Type, Normal, Category Status Power 0, Description, forms a protective shield around the body, completely blocking an opponent's attacks for a short period. Cannot be used consecutively. Cooldown, 10 minutes after each use. Price, 5,000 points. Skill, Substitute. Type, Normal. Category Status, Power 0 Description, reduces one's own HP to create a duplicate that takes a single attack. If the attack's intensity does not exceed the substitute's endurance, the substitute remains. Price, 4,000 points. The two skills together cost 9,000 points, a reminder of how expensive skills could be. Aoki had been incredibly lucky to get that valuable green tier aptitude Pokemon egg. Otherwise, he might not have had enough points to buy even one Protect disc by the time he left the trial. The exchange clerk watched expressionlessly as Aoki exchanged for two such expensive skills. His eye twitched. Did the kid not value points at all? He grumbled silently, but didn't stop. He opened the safe holding stacks of skill discs, carefully selected two white glowing discs, and handed them over. To Aoki, points were only useful when converted into combat power. Otherwise, they were just numbers. Once Murkrow learned Protect and Substitute, its survivability would jump dramatically. With its already high speed, assuming no huge level gap, Murkrow would actually have a fighting chance. Aoki still had 11,000 points on hand and flipped to the Dark-type section without hesitation. He exchanged 3,000 points for Dark Pulse. As a Dark-type attack, Dark Pulse had decent power, good accuracy, and a chance to cause flinching. That left him with 8,000 points. He paused, then decided to save the rest for now. He just exchanged for 3 skills at once, and combined with the Screech Disc Murkrow already had, that meant Murkrow could learn 4 moves immediately. There was a big difference between learning a move and mastering it. Murkrow would need time and focused practice to use those skills effortlessly. After some thought, he asked the clerk for a training device for flying Pokemon, a weight device with a maximum limit of 50 caddies. Up to now, Murkrow had been using wood as an improvised weight, but as it adapted, they'd need something adjustable. Team Rocket's scientists had, apparently inspired by the XP, Share developed a simple but useful weight control training device. It wasn't cutting-edge tech, so the 50 caddy model cost only 200 points. And 10 great balls, Aoki added. 10 at 50 points each came to 500 points. Although he hadn't planned to catch more Pokemon on the island, his conversation with the mysterious person had convinced him he needed to train others. The final trial itself wasn't that hard, aside from a few tricky opponents like Gujia, but the small matters the mysterious person mentioned could be big problems for Aoki. Training more Pokemon was suddenly essential. He packed everything into his storage belt and handed his identity magnetic card to the clerk. The clerk ran it through a machine and stored the remaining 7,200 points on it. This exchange had cost a total of 12,700 points. An extra 100 points had been for the Pokemon egg inspection. Aoki walked over to a solitary machine in the corner, the Pokemon Learning Machine. It could import skills from skill discs directly into a Pokemon's mind, letting them learn instantly, one of the most advanced devices in the world. Using it was free, but Aoki didn't start with the discs. First, he swapped Murkrow's old Pokeball for a new Great Ball. To Murkrow, whose Pokeball space was usually empty, the upgrade was like moving from a tiny studio to a roomy apartment. Even if Murkrow rarely stayed inside, Aoki wanted it to have a comfortable place. He placed Murkrow in the Great Ball, set it on the learning machine's slot, and then pulled the skill discs from storage. Including the already owned Screech disc, there were 4 discs to run through. Each disc took 1 minute to process. When a disc was used, it became an ordinary, worthless piece of plastic. Fortunately, it was evening, and the exchange office was empty, apart from Aoki and the clerk. If others had seen him spend all those discs at once, they'd probably call him wasteful. For Murkrow, with its green tier aptitude, mastering the new moves was only a matter of time. After the last disc finished, Aoki released Murkrow from the Great Ball. Caw! It immediately flapped out, preferring the open air to any ball. Aoki smiled and smoothed its feathers. How is it? Did you learn them? Murkrow answered with an eager caw, caw. It felt like magic. The methods for moves it had never known before were suddenly clear, as if they had always been part of it. To prove it, Murkrow narrowed its eyes and a pale green energy shield bloomed around its body. The shield lasted about 2 seconds before fading. Protect, Aoki said, eyes bright. Protect was familiar to him. Once a Pokémon reached a certain level, almost everyone learned it. A life-saving ability that could entirely block damage was invaluable. When Murkrow tried to use it again immediately and found it couldn't, Aoki put a hand on its wing with a smile. That one has a 10-minute cooldown. Let's go. Time to head back. They left the exchange office and walked into the night. The clerk watched Aoki's retreating figure and muttered, "Lucky kid, caught the eye of that esteemed one." What he didn't know was that Aoki already knew more about the mysterious person's rank and unit than the clerk did. He only didn't know yet whether that attention would be a blessing or a curse. Team Rocket's base always kept 300 rooms ready for trial participants, each door marked with a trial number. The dormitories were empty at night, except for the moonlit figures of Aoki and Murkrow, their shadows stretching long on the path. Aoki quickly found his assigned room. He'd never slept there before, but it was tidy, a simple single bed, a small desk, and a chair. Sparse, but after living outdoors, a soft bed felt luxurious. He locked the door and collapsed onto it, content. Murkrow, also seeing a human room for the first time, zipped around curiously. In the base's central office, the two people who sat behind the highest-ranking officer's desk remained as they had been earlier. Viper, Team Rocket's chief instructor for the trial, gently wiped imaginary dust off a luxury ball with a handkerchief, staring at it as if it were something precious. "I heard a kid caught your interest?" Viper asked aloud. The figure across from him, entirely shrouded in a black robe, sat motionless like a meditating monk and gave no answer. Chapter 28, Test Resume Update. A silent, tense calm hung between them, no awkwardness at all. The black-robed man wasn't surprised that Viper had found out so quickly. This was his territory, everyone here answered to him. It would have been stranger if Viper hadn't known. After a moment, he let out a soft, considered hum. Viper smiled, a scarred grin that could frighten a child. The two of them were familiar. As a high-ranking member of Team Rocket, Viper had some idea who the mysterious man was and what the Shadow Unit meant. If that man had noticed Aoki, then Aoki must possess something unusual, but Viper wouldn't pry unless invited. As if reading his thoughts, the robed man hesitated and then said, "There's a darkness about that boy," and a note of familiarity. He paused, and his voice turned more serious. "He feels like him." Viper, who had been idly polishing a luxury ball, stopped as if someone had hit a pause button. Silence stretched between them. His hand trembled slightly before he resumed wiping, but the unsteadiness was obvious to anyone watching. The last word had struck him hard. The robed man fell silent, knowing he had revealed something significant. "That's unexpected," Viper said finally. It really was. The him the stranger had invoked was the leader of the Shadow Unit, the man directly under Giovanni. He was the most shadowy figure within Team Rocket, second only to Giovanni himself. His rank outranked the 3 executives, the 4 generals, and the 3 beastmen. Outsiders knew the executives were powerful, the generals' forces unstoppable, and the beastmen brutal, but they had no inkling of the Shadow Unit, a hidden entity far more mysterious and terrifying than any of those names. Viper cleared his throat and forced his composure back into place. "Ahem, I heard you picked up a high-potential Pokémon egg from him?" The robed man, even as deputy leader of the Shadow Unit, was loath to speak much of his superior. He nodded once beneath his hood and drew from beneath his robe a small, pale egg, the green potential Weedle egg that Aoki had traded for points. Weedle? Viper recognized it at a glance. He extended his hand, only 2 fingers remaining, and laid them lightly on the egg. Warmth radiated up through his skin. Yes, it evolves into Beedrill, useful as a temporary combat unit. The stranger didn't hide his intent. He had recently escaped a confrontation with 3 members of the Elite Four and had lost 3 of his main Pokémon. The rest had suffered various injuries and needed time to recover. He wouldn't be moving aggressively for a while. "It grows fast and can be field-ready in short order," the man went on. With focused training, it can reach near Elite 4 caliber. Its lifespan is short, but it's enough as a stopgap. Viper's brow rose. You're still nursing your team back for a long time? The robed man was quiet for a moment, then sighed. As expected of the poison-type Elite Four, their attack left my Pokémon poisoned. I don't know when they'll be fit again. This egg is a whim, a contingency. Viper fell silent and returned to polishing the luxury ball. The two of them listened to the night slide by. Aoki and Murkrow had not stopped training through the night, though they had moved from the open forest into their small dorm. Aoki strapped the power weight, bought with his exchanged points, onto Murkrow himself. When inactive, the device was nearly weightless, more like a garment than gear. It fit like a small backpack, able to expand and contract. Aoki adjusted it snugly under Murkrow's feathers so it wouldn't slip. Using the remote, he set the weight to about 10 pounds, Murkrow's usual training load. When activated, the bird felt heavier. Flapping took more effort. Unlike the crude method of tying wooden blocks to its wings, the power weight distributed resistance across Murkrow's whole body, allowing every part to be exercised. After a short adjustment, Murkrow adapted easily. It was infinitely better than the old blocks. Let's keep it here for now. Don't increase it too fast, Aoki said, smiling as he watched Murkrow grow accustomed to the device. Unless it's absolutely necessary, you'll train with this weight. We'll raise it slowly once you're ready. Murkrow cawed excitedly. With the new setup, it could feel itself getting stronger. After a quick morning routine, Aoki prepared energy cubes for Murkrow and ate some dry rations himself. By the time they stepped outside, the sun had already lifted above the horizon. Dormitory doors opened and people spilled onto the walkways, all heading for the central plaza. Today was the 7th day, the second official test. Almost everyone had returned. Team Rocket's staff and the grunts who managed the trials were visible everywhere. Of the original roughly 150 participants, only about 120 remained. The other 30 or so were still out in the wild or would not return. The softness of their faces had been stripped away by the trials. Cold, blank expressions replaced innocence. A hard, dangerous light sat in many eyes. The island had taken its toll. The participants clustered into 4 groups. Aoki stood with the largest of them, people mostly alone, sometimes paired, their expressions guarded and suspicious. They made up nearly half of the survivors. To the south gathered the second largest group, led by Gujia. Aoki met Gujia's stare. The man offered a wicked smile, then looked away. Aoki paid him little mind. To the west, a woman led the third group. Her Zubat was more than twice the size of a normal one, and that oversized Pokémon was what made Aoki remember her. The smallest group sat in the east corner, only 9 people. Their leader was a young man with a bright, sunny smile that hid cold eyes, a smiling tiger. The 8 around him were misled by his genial face, people who had once longed for kindness and would have made loyal League members. But here on Team Rocket's trial island, such softness was a liability. The crowd quieted. Instructor Viper and his subordinates climbed the platform in the center of the plaza. Unlike before, there were 2 chairs. Viper took one. The black-robed figure who had slunk in at the back of the procession took the other. Aoki narrowed his eyes, the same man who had given him the provisional Shadow Unit badge. The robed stranger, as if alerted, turned his head toward Aoki. His face remained hidden beneath the hood, but Aoki felt the weight of his gaze settle on him. After a few seconds, it slid away, and Aoki let out a small, private sigh of relief. Confronting a master like that with his current strength still felt overwhelming. Chapter 29, Relaxation First update. The second largest group had gathered to the south of the square, led by Gujia, someone Qingmu recognized. Powerful figures clustered around him, and when Qingmu glanced over, Gujia met his gaze, wore an odd smile, then turned away. Qingmu paid him little mind. Only after the mysterious man in the stands took his seat did Viper finally look over and begin to study the field. Seeing the expressions on the contestants' faces, Viper nodded with satisfaction. At last, their attitudes matched those of real trial participants. A week ago, they'd still been playing at being challengers. Viper had not worried about the drop in numbers. Compared with past years, the current turnout was high and showed a strong cohort. Only 50 slots were available for those who could pass the trials, and that was the absolute cap. In previous runs, the number of successful candidates rarely reached 50. In the weakest years, only about 20 made it through. Now, after the initial and most brutal culling, more than 120 remained, and Viper was pleased. He shot a look at the subordinate beside him, signaling it was time to begin the second test. The second test would be almost the same as the first. It measured attack power. Such a test couldn't fully capture a trainer's worth, but if their attack didn't meet the standard, they couldn't be considered strong. The staff explained the rules, and Qingmu learned that, although the mechanics were unchanged, a new stipulation had been added. The last place contestant in every upcoming test would be eliminated immediately. The announcement set the square murmuring into a roar. The new rules struck hard at those hoping to exploit loopholes. Previously, even if you failed to finish in the top 50, you might survive the trial and later join up as a low-ranking grunt if you met basic standards. No resources, but a chance at life, and with luck, advancement. Now those who planned to cling to the strong or hide in base camps and simply limp to the end were chained by a merciless rule. If they slipped to last even once, they would be cut from the trial. No second chances. Like a flock on the prairie chased by lions, the slowest would be the first to die. Survival forced everyone to run harder. Team Rocket had become the predators, and the contestants the prey. The crowd grew louder, the weaker among them paling. Viper scowled and snapped. "Shut up! If you don't want to be tested, then don't. All of you will be treated as the last one." The shouts died immediately. No one dared to rile the man who held their fates. Under orders from Team Rocket's underlings, the contestants began to line up, but nobody wanted to be first. Being first meant facing the unknown. What if everyone following posted higher scores? Viper's expression darkened as the test stalled, and the lackeys tightened the pressure. They understood Viper's temper better than the still naive challengers did. "Ch-ch, so slow. I'll go first." Gujia's voice cut through the tension. With a sneer, he strode to the front of the line with his Arbok, whose tongue flicked and coiled body radiated menace. Once someone went up, others fell into the queue. For the strong, position in line hardly mattered. Team Rocket had placed Qingmu toward the back. "Begin," the official by the trial stone announced. Gujia mounted the platform without hesitation. "Arbok! Bite! Hiss!" The serpent lunged, fangs flashing with dark light as it struck the trial stone, then withdrew immediately, precise and disciplined. Gujia trained his Pokemon thoroughly. Flair didn't mean sloppiness. "Attack value, 258, the host called. Voices erupted beneath the stage. "Boss Guji 158? That's nearly 3 times his first score of 98, one of Gujia's followers crowed. "Right off the bat, so high!" Others felt the pressure. Gujia smiled and stepped down as the next contestants followed. Those who finished the test left either elated or crushed. If someone discovered they were currently last, their face would drain, hands clench, sweat gather on their brow as they watched each subsequent score, desperately hoping a lower one would appear. Relief would wash over them when someone worse turned up. Then the new last-place contestant would repeat the same fear. Most had already been tested. Gujia's 258 still held first place. Second place belonged to the girl who had earlier stood in the west corner with a large crobat. Her score was 227, and her name, people announced, was Jasmine. Third place was a lone trainer with an average face and a mighty Ina, scoring 225, surprising many for being only 2 points behind Jasmine. Fourth was the young man Qingmu had privately tagged a smiling tiger. His name was Soros. He'd drawn a few others into his fold with a constant sunny smile and a wheezing, scoring 215. Then it was Qingmu's turn. Gujia's smirk faded into attention as Qingmu stepped up, and even Viper and the mysterious stranger in the stands shifted to watch. Some in the crowd recognized him and muttered, "It's him. He was second last time with some tricks. I wonder what his score will be." Others sneered. "Those tricks won't help now," they said, blaming him for earlier shifting of ranks. Yet those with keener eyes had noted Murkrow's size and knew it was not weak. Qingmu ignored the chatter. "Murkrow, full power. Wing attack, caw!" Murkrow tossed its wings, a surge of flying energy condensing along its feathers. It leapt and struck the trial stone with clean force. No shortcuts, no gimmicks. A moment later, the trial stone flashed. Attack value 265. The host stammered before booming. Attack value 265 points. Currently first. Next. A stunned silence swept the crowd. Qingmu, long dismissed by some as a trickster, had outscored them all. He had no subordinates, had grown on his own in the wilderness, and his result left many jaws hanging open. Even Gujia, who had fought Qingmu and respected his abilities, was taken aback. He hadn't been prepared for Qingmu to top his own score. Gujia watched him with a new expression, part calculation, part doubt. The question formed in his mind whether the harsh solitude of the wild could indeed forge strength faster than gathering power and resources in a group. He could no longer be sure which approach was better. Chapter 30. Killing the Chicken to Scare the Monkey, Part 2. The most terrified were Gujia's subordinates, especially those who had clamored to take Aomori down the day before. They were drenched in cold sweat, relieved that Gujia had stopped them from acting recklessly. After seeing Aomori's performance, they knew that even if Gujia ordered them to hassle him later, they probably wouldn't dare. A single number can't capture everything about a person, but it can show a significant part. Could an ordinary trainer withstand that kind of attack power? Aomori didn't care about anyone else's thoughts or how he affected them. The moment he activated the chip, he had already decided the trial participants here wouldn't keep pace with him. That was his confidence. He led Darkrai down from the platform and walked to a corner, leaning against the wall to close his eyes and rest. He wasn't very interested in anyone else's scores. On the grandstand, Viper frowned, not surprised by Aomori's result. Shouldn't someone favored by that mysterious figure perform well? If anything, he thought the score was a little low. One question nagged at him. "This Darkrai, it looks," he began, uncertain. The cloaked figure beside him understood, and after a brief pause, nodded. A hoarse voice came from under the black robe. "You're right, it's still carrying weights." Viper had been about 70 or 80% sure of his guess. He was a bit surprised that this kid could train a naturally flawed Darkrai so well in such a short time. He straightened and said, "Oh, then this kid is indeed not bad. If Shadow doesn't take him, how about he joins me?" The cloaked person glanced at Viper and let the corner of his mouth lift. "What do you think?" he shot back. Viper, feeling brushed off, pouted. "How boring. You people in Shadow are always so serious." He knew Shadow's rules. Until a Shadow mission was completed, no other Team Rocket department could interfere, unless the mission failed or the chosen person died. From the moment Aomori accepted the provisional member badge from the cloaked man, he was effectively a Shadow recruit. Shadow members were exclusive, even among Team Rocket itself. The cloaked man and Viper were exceptions. They had been friends before both joined Team Rocket, but rules were rules. Until Aomori finished the Shadow mission or was judged to have failed it, no other department could legally recruit him. This rule came from Giovanni himself. As Shadow was Giovanni's first established unit after he took control, its members were selected with care. "Hush, Viper," the cloaked man said, his tone sharpening. Despite their friendship, he respected Shadow deeply, and his reverence for Giovanni went even deeper. Aomori, too, admired Giovanni. He saw a charisma unmatched by anyone else he'd known, composed, persuasive, and masterful at leadership. If Aomori had grown up inside Team Rocket in this world, he would likely have been one of Giovanni's loyal followers. Even as a transmigrator who knew the plot and held some resistance, Aomori still felt a strong respect for Giovanni. Team Rocket had not always been powerful. Just over a decade ago, it was a small regional organization, led by Giovanni's mother. Back then, resources were scarce. Giovanni's first Pokemon had been a Beedrill, an odd choice if wealth and resources had been abundant. That Beedrill eventually became legendary in its own right, but the resources poured into it could have built several pseudo-legendary Pokemon. Giovanni had single-handedly grown Team Rocket into the largest criminal organization in Kanto in about 10 years, eliminating or absorbing rival groups. Outside of the Alliance, Team Rocket was the most powerful entity in the region, a testament to Giovanni's ability. He was not only an excellent leader, but also a formidable fighter, able to confront champions directly, earning him the nickname of the Hidden Ground Type Elite Four, not just a casual moniker. Given that, it was no wonder Shadow members idealized him. Viper realized he'd touched a nerve, but didn't push the matter. In the minds of other Team Rocket departments, Shadow members were zealots. Better not to provoke them. The testing moved quickly. Each trainer sent a Pokémon to hit the trial stone once, and the data was recorded. Before long, everyone had finished. No one surpassed Aomori. Final ranking. First, attack value 265, Aomori. Second, attack value 258. Third, attack value 227, Jasmine. Fourth, attack value 225, Alec. Fifth, attack value 215, Soros. 123rd, attack value 45. The top ranks remained nearly the same, Aomori and Gujia leading the field, with the second and third places pulling away from the rest. At the bottom, a measly 45 points put one participant at rock bottom. Even in the first test, he would have been only mid-pack. The trainer stood there ashen-faced and dazed, repeating, "Impossible, no, please no." He didn't snap out of it until the rocket grunt in charge strode over, grabbed his hands, and prepared to drag him away. He struggled, but two battle-hardened grunts were more than his untrained body could handle. Their grips were like iron clamps, and he paled, shouting, "No! Give me another chance! Give me another chance!" Tears and mucus streamed down his face. A yellow stain appeared between his legs. Everything was futile. He should have expected this fate while lounging comfortably at the base. "Rattata, help me!" he cried, remembering his Pokémon. But before Rattata could act, two Mightyena appeared and bared their teeth. The little rodent wanted to help its trainer, but dared not move. Under the merciless jaws of the Mightyena, Rattata perished. Watching his last hope die, the trainer gradually stopped fighting. Dragged away by the grunts, he vanished from sight. No one doubted what awaited him. Team Rocket had once again displayed its ruthlessness for everyone to see, treating human lives as expendable. Aomori leaned against the wall and watched without shock. It was just another life. He had killed dozens, maybe even 100 people in his earlier life. Which Rocket member didn't have blood on their hands? Did they think Team Rocket in reality behaved like in the cartoons, where they show up and get instantly blasted away? That was fiction. Killing the chicken to scare the monkey, Aomori thought. The tactic worked. Scare the weak into submission so the rest stay in line. He understood Viper's motive, to tighten the leash on complacent members. This was a ruthless competition. Move forward or be trampled. For the strong here, the scene barely rippled their minds. At most, it sparked a little contempt. It didn't concern them. The situation was like the catfish effect. Sardines locked in a net will stagnate and die, but introduce a catfish, and they start swimming frantically to avoid being eaten, increasing their chances of getting to market alive. The trial participants were the sardines, and Team Rocket the catfish. Only under the threat of the catfish would the sardines fight to grow, so Team Rocket could harvest stronger recruits. Chapter 31, Refusal. First update. The rest of the test passed without incident. The top 10 went up onto the stage, swiped their ID cards, and each picked up 200 points. For most people, 200 points was a significant sum. For Aomori, who still had more than 7,000 points, it was barely worth noting. Still, every little bit helps. Team Rocket was strict about point management, and being seen with constant windfalls could invite dangerous attention. Aomori had been lucky to find a rare green aptitude Pokémon egg, and even luckier that his chip could identify its value, 20,000 points in no time. That kind of windfall couldn't be replicated by others. Missions were the steady source of points. Finding high aptitude Pokémon or rare items to trade was mostly luck, or else foresight. Aomori's real advantage was the chip. Any rare aptitude Pokémon that crossed his path couldn't escape its scan. His most reliable way to earn points, then, was through capturing Pokémon, if luck cooperated. Even so, there was such a thing as showing off too much. If he constantly traded in rare catches for points, people would start asking questions. Someone who could identify a Pokémon's aptitude without instruments might be hauled into a lab for study. Aomori had learned to balance being conspicuous when necessary and keeping a low profile when needed. With the tests over, the crowd thinned and everyone wore solemn looks. The day's events felt like a ticking clock, reminders that everyone needed to push harder. After this, no one would afford to slack off. Poison Snake and the black-robed man slipped away from the plaza amid a protection detail of Team Rocket grunts as soon as the last contestant left the stage. Their rank put them well above petty affairs. Their subordinates could deal with anything minor. If Poison Snake hadn't had a financial stake in the quality of these trainees, he wouldn't have bothered to watch them at all. An Elite 4-level suspect fussing over recruits who weren't even full trainers? Preposterous, unless there was something important to observe. The mysterious man who had accompanied Poison Snake had his own reason. He wanted a closer look at Aomori. Although he'd given Aomori the Shadow Reserve member medal yesterday, he still knew little about him. The test was a chance to observe, and from the results, Aomori had met the man's minimal expectations. As Aomori was preparing to leave, Gujia and his group cut him off. Murkrow was first to react. Perched and circling, it let out an indignant caw at Gujia's approach. Gujia's Arbok answered in kind. It tightened its coils, not in fear, but in that silent, terrible posture snakes take before striking, muscles drawn like a bowstring ready to unleash. Aomori gently smoothed Murkrow's feathers to calm it. Gujia lifted an eyebrow and signaled Arbok not to overreact. Aomori's chip flashed as he casually scanned Arbok. Pokemon, light green. Gender, male level 16, type poison. Ability, intimidate. Held item, neg moves. Pursuit, poison fang, glare. Basic moves, bind, leer, poison sting, bite, glare. Taught moves, snatch, TMs. Double team, Gujia's Arbok was no pushover. Competently trained, if a tier below Murkrow, thanks to a light green aptitude and less impressive base stats. Base stats mattered in the long run. They made the difference between pseudo-legendary and ordinary. What surprised Aomori was that Arbok knew double team. He remembered the move cost 1,000 points to teach. Gujia must have pooled resources with his subordinates to afford it. 20 and 30 points here, favors there. The two stood in silence, each waiting for the other to speak. Gujia's friends, who'd been loud and arrogant the day before, bowed their heads and stayed quiet. No one was eager to pick a fight now. I didn't expect to be outdone, Gujia finally said, heavy with forced respect. He'd always assumed he was the unrivaled star of this trial. If Aomori hadn't interfered, Gujia would have envisioned himself rising smoothly through the ranks, even into a Team Rocket executive role. Suddenly, he'd been usurped, and the bruise was visible on his face. Aomori understood how Gujia felt, but he didn't care. He stayed still and expressionless, waiting for Gujia's next move. And then? Aomori asked coolly. That indifference stung. Gujia's face darkened as his followers tucked their chins further in. Normally, a sycophant would leap forward to defend his leader, but none dared. Facing Aomori, they felt small. When giants fight, lesser devils suffer. Gujia's shoulders tensed. He could feel his one advantage slipping. His brother, the captain. He hated thinking of relying on his brother's name to intimidate, and he wasn't even sure it would work on Aomori. In the end, he snorted and left quickly, not trusting himself to hold back if he stayed. His group followed without hesitation, as if any delay would leave them exposed to Aomori. No sooner had they gone than another group approached. Soros, the fifth-place finisher with the easy smile, led them. Aomori bristled inwardly. He preferred the blunt hostility of Gujia to the faux friendliness of Soros. Soros stepped forward with practiced cheer. "Haha, Brother Aomori, you were amazing! Taking first place. Who would have guessed?" He reached out to pat Aomori's shoulder. Aomori took a step back, avoiding the gesture. Soros's smile faltered for a heartbeat, awkward and exposed, but he recovered instantly. His smile returned, and a colder glint flashed behind it. "What is it?" Aomori asked. "Oh, nothing important." Soros laughed it off. "Actually, it's this. I've just taken a high-paying mission, but I don't think I can finish it alone. Interested in teaming up, we'd split the points evenly." Missions were the trainee's best source of points. A request to pair up could be genuine, or it could be a recruitment ploy. Aomori sniffed at the idea of being roped into someone else's team. "Not interested," he said, and walked away without looking back. Soros's smile froze as Aomori's back receded. He let the expression darken for an instant, then pasted the smile back on. "If Brother Aomori isn't interested, we'll manage ourselves," he told his followers, turning to them. They pretended disappointment at missing the chance to bring Aomori in, but their trust in Soros rose a notch. After all, wasn't this the kind of mission where the leader took charge and let the others share the spoils? Soros looked as though he'd given up something of himself for them, an image that suited him just fine. As Aomuki turned to leave, his eyes flicked once toward Soros's coughing. Dark yellow, male, level 17, poison type with levitate, no held item. It had the egg move stockpile and knew poison gas, tackle, smog, smokescreen, pursuit, and clear smog. Its only TM was haze. It was a decent coughing, not high potential, but a good level and clearly well-trained. He's got skill, Aomuki muttered. Someone with that kind of composure, so long as they weren't exposed, could do well. He returned to the exchange center. Because he'd just finished his test, it was still quiet. The staff member who'd helped him with skill exchanges yesterday recognized him the instant he walked in. Their eyes met. Under the expectant gaze, Aomuki nodded once, silently asking to be taken to the mysterious person. With a quick exchange of glances, the staffer led him to the secret door. Truthfully, the staffer seemed even more anxious than Aomuki. An adult had returned earlier and the staffer had been desperate to prove his worth. When Aomuki finally arrived, the man relaxed. Checking to make sure no one was watching, he tapped a rhythmic code on the door with his knuckles. The lock clicked, and the hidden entrance opened. He gestured for Aomuki to hurry inside. Beyond the door stretched a long corridor lit by scattered candles that gave just enough light to see. Aomuki walked in silence with Murkrow at his shoulder, following the passage for several minutes before they reached a spacious room. One wall was lined with bookshelves, tens of thousands of books by a rough guess. Aomuki couldn't help but be impressed. Such a library was rare on Trial Island. In the center of the room, a single desk held a lamp. Someone in a black robe sat reading, apparently unaware of their arrival. Aomuki wasn't foolish enough to believe they'd gone unnoticed. He told Murkrow to land and approached the desk, waiting respectfully while the robed figure finished reading. The figure gave a faint smile but returned to his book. Just as Murkrow began to twitch with impatience, the man slowly looked up. His voice was hoarse as he spoke. "Help me retrieve something. I'll give you 10,000 points when you return." He produced a map, placed it on the desk, and pushed it toward Aomuki without asking if he wanted the job. When Aomuki saw the hand that came from beneath the robe, only 2 fingers remained. The sight made his pupils contract. He knew that wound all too well, amputation after severe poisoning. For someone presumably at least trainer level to have lost fingers to poison meant their opponent must have been terrifying. Aomuki controlled his expression, took the map, and scrutinized it. Compared to the crude treasure maps used by Team Rocket, this one was astonishingly detailed. Every landmark and path was clearly marked. Not wanting to keep the man waiting, Aomuki nodded, slipped the map into his storage belt, and said, "Yes." The robed figure inclined his head and waved Aomuki away. As Aomuki turned to leave, the figure, head bowed, added quietly, "My name is Shadow." Aomuki paused, then stepped back and replied with respect, "Yes, Lord Shadow." With no further instructions, Aomuki and Murkrow left the hidden room. The sudden brightness outside made them squint after the dim corridor. Aomuki closed his eyes to adjust, while Murkrow amusingly shielded its face with its wings. Once they were in the open, Aomuki muttered under his breath, "Shadow. Dark Shadow," recalling a rumor from his previous life within Team Rocket. 2 vice leaders of a shadow unit named Dark and Shadow, said to be orphans, Sakaki had brought in from outside. The shadow unit's name supposedly came from them. There were hints of their existence, but no one had ever seen the leader. Some even claimed the position lay vacant because no one met Sakaki's standards. Those were distant matters. Aomuki's immediate concern was the mission Shadow had given him. Shadow hadn't asked whether Aomuki knew the meaning of the medal he carried, and although he'd hidden it well, Aomuki did know. He wasn't opposed to joining the Shadow unit. Greater danger meant greater opportunity and resources, which fit his aims. Still, were Shadow unit missions really this straightforward? He smiled helplessly. This was just the beginning. Aomuki prepared for the trip. He felt that even a 1 square meter storage space was cramped, stuffing it with medicines and food. He changed into a white Team Rocket uniform, buckled on the exclusive belt, and set off with Murkrow unnoticed, following the route marked on Shadow's map into the forest. Trial Island's forest was semi-managed and one of Team Rocket's key resources. It hadn't been overexploited. The trees grew tall and dense. Midday sunlight filtered through the leaves in scattered patches, and when clouds passed, the woods turned dim. The environment supported many Pokémon and left a network of animal trails. Finding the right trail made travel much easier. Deeper into the forest, Pokémon sightings increased. Grass types melted into the undergrowth when they saw Aoki and Murkrow. Weedle and Caterpie crawled along trunks or nibbled on leaves, eager to evolve. Spinarak and Ladybug were occasionally visible, while Pidgey and Spearow darted through the canopy in frantic chases. Wild animals also appeared now and then, but because they were still on the forest's edge, none were strong enough to threaten Aoki. He kept his detection chip active. Every Pokémon within range was scanned and cataloged, even those well camouflaged. Because the encounters were weak, even battle-loving Murkrow showed no interest in fighting. They'd left in the afternoon, and according to the map, they wouldn't finish the trip in one day. Aoki's plan was to find water, make camp, and push on the next morning. Before night fell, he found a small, clear stream. The soft, wet mud around it was covered with Pokémon tracks, a good sign that it was a safe, regularly used drinking spot. 10 meters from the water, he made a fire and set up his tent. He'd bought the tent and some supplies for 200 points before leaving. The pricier items were medical supplies and antidotes. Aoki didn't begrudge the cost. Having comforts in the wild was worth some points. The gear did take up half his storage belt space, which only confirmed his feeling that the space wasn't enough. Murkrow stayed busy as well. Ever dedicated, it trained constantly, flying back and forth to fetch dry branches with shuttle-run speed. The tent was soon up and the fire crackled. Murkrow's food bowl had also been upgraded, from a crude wooden basin to a gleaming metal one, now filled with energy cubes that gave off a faint lemon scent. Aoki ate instant oatmeal, made with freshly boiled water and bread with a milky aroma. Their lives were a world away from a few days ago, like moving from the Stone Age to the comforts of the 1980s and 90s. Chapter 33, Kairos' Revenge, Part 1. The night passed quietly. Between the insect chirps and the rustle of leaves, Aoki and Murkrow slept soundly in their tent, and time slipped by unnoticed. When they woke, the sun was just lifting over the horizon like a rosy-cheeked face. They built a fire, cooked, and began their morning routine of training, unchanged habits that had become the backbone of their days. Aoki worked through his exercises while Murkrow practiced its moves. They both believed steady training would pay off. Murkrow had just learned 4 new moves from the skill teaching machine: Dark Pulse, Protect, Substitute, and Screech. Learning them all at once meant rigorous practice was necessary. Aside from Protect, which couldn't be trained in the usual way, the other moves required repetition and control to become battle-ready. Protect and Substitute in particular were life-saving techniques for surviving in the wild, and Dark Pulse, Murkrow's main Dark-type attack, had to be refined. Wing Attack, learned a few days earlier after a level-up, also needed practice, but carrying weights had already strengthened its wings, so Wing Attack was improving naturally. Murkrow, use Dark Pulse on that big tree again, Aoki called after finishing his own training. He'd moved on to focused sessions with Murkrow. Murkrow cocked its head, emitted a sharp caw, and gathered malice into its body. Dark energy coalesced and rolled outward like a wave, crashing into the trunk of a medium-thick tree. Leaves rustled. The bark took several dark scratches. When the attack faded, the black marks sighed with a faint, hissing residue, the small after-effect of dark energy. "You saw the damage just now, right?" Aoki said, pointing out the weaknesses. "A hit like that won't down most Pokémon. It only stripped some bark off the tree. Some psychic types might take heavy damage, but others won't feel much. Don't worry, you just learned it. If you learn to limit the spread and concentrate the energy, this move will be devastating. Strong psychic and ghost types will fall to it." Murkrow nodded eagerly. It could sense the move's potential. It just hadn't learned to shape the power yet. Waves of malice shivered around it as it worked to shrink the energy's diffusion, gathering the dark force into a tighter, more focused pulse. When it felt ready, it blasted the same tree again. This time the tree showed a deeper wound. A finger-deep black hole smoked and smoldered where the energy had struck. The surrounding foliage barely trembled. Murkrow's strike had been much more concentrated and powerful than before. Aoki smiled with satisfaction. Murkrow had a natural talent for controlling energy, a quality not shown by mere aptitude numbers, but by how quickly a Pokémon learned to manipulate power. Concentrate the energy and cut waste, he advised. This release was much stronger, but you're still too slow gathering it. You'll have to speed up the process. It's tedious, but you'll get there with more practice. Good work, Murkrow. Aoki's praise made Murkrow beam. A little encouragement always doubled a Pokémon's effort. After another hour of training, they packed up and continued the journey. Their primary goal was still to find the item Shadow had mentioned, but basic training couldn't be neglected. Every minute wasted was a missed opportunity. A few energy cubes later, Murkrow's fatigue vanished. The small, concentrated boosts restored it to peak condition in minutes, an effect that would otherwise take hours. With the sun rising, diurnal Pokémon began to stir. The forest felt alive and energized under the light, and as they went deeper, the Pokémon grew stronger. Fewer of them roamed in numbers now. Many had begun staking out territories. Occasionally, they passed injured Pokémon or old carcasses, reminders of the forest's harshness, which they ignored as they kept their guard up. Aoki's chip, always scanning, warned them first. Several Pokémon had been shadowing them and were closing in. When Aoki halted suddenly, a pincer lunged from the bushes toward the supposedly frail human. Murkrow! Caw! Murkrow reacted at once. With a burst of tailwind to gain positioning and a surprise attack, it sent the four attacking pincer tumbling and out of the way. Aoki couldn't help a small laugh. This was the same pincer Murkrow had beaten before. This time, it had tried a smarter plan. Strike the trainer first. It simply misjudged. The chip had detected the approach, and Aoki's reflexes were ready. But the first pincer's cry was a signal. 3 more pincer erupted from the thicket, their eyes fixed on Aoki. The chip's data put them at roughly equal strength to the first. No pushovers, but not overwhelming. You really picked a bad time to gang up, Aoki murmured. A few days ago, Pincer had been easy prey for Murkrow. Now, with Murkrow stronger, even 4 of them would be in for a nasty surprise. The 4 Pinsir exchanged a coordinated cry and charged as one, their mandibles clicking. They'd clearly learned teamwork. This wasn't a random ambush, but a deliberate group attack on the smallest threat they'd identified. Murkrow, screech! Aoki called calmly, his stance steady. Chapter 34, Injured, Part 2. A piercing screech shot from Murkrow's throat, so sharp it made the instinct to cover one's ears immediate. The 4 Heracross facing it felt it most of all. They had never heard such a dreadful sound. It drilled into their minds and made their bodies tremble as if their hard carapaces had loosened. Murkrow, let's see how your training has paid off. Aoki smiled and took a remote from his storage belt, pressing it lightly. It controlled the weights strapped to Murkrow. When Aoki switched the weights off, Murkrow felt its body instantly lighten. With the tailwind of that relief, it closed the distance to the Heracross in the blink of an eye. Caw! Caw! Murkrow had never felt so fast. Shedding the weight made it feel like a gust of wind. It had no idea how well its weight training would work, but after only a few days, its speed had climbed noticeably. Aoki's watched its unbridled swiftness with a pleased smile. For a Murkrow moving like that, the 4 Heracross in front of it were little more than fodder. Murkrow, stop horsing around. Use Gust to hold the 2 in front, then deal with the 2 in the back. Charge and finish them with Wing Attack. Murkrow nodded and flapped its wings hard. Without the constraint of the weight, Gust came out faster and hit harder. In an instant, 2 white whirlwinds of flying-type energy formed to block the 2 charging Heracross. Then Murkrow spun and shot toward the 2 behind them, concentrating flying-type energy in its wings. With a whoosh, it appeared before the left Heracross and slammed into it. The blow sent the bug-type flying into a large tree. It fell to the ground, motionless. 1 hit was all it took. The piercing sound had reduced their defenses. Murkrow was at full power after shedding its restraints, and flying moves deal double damage to bug types. Everything combined to knock that Heracross out instantly. The remaining Heracross, enraged, lowered its horn and charged, using its signature move, Vital Throw, to slam into Murkrow. Murkrow, protect, then Wing Attack. Finish it! Aoki's barked. Murkrow reacted instantly, triggering the mysterious energy stored in its body. A pale green shield sprang up around it and took the full force of the Heracross's horn. The shield shattered, but it had done its job. The attack was absorbed. As the stunned Heracross blinked at its failed strike, Murkrow's wings, bristling with concentrated flying energy, cut into its shell. A sickening crack echoed as the carapace split, and the Heracross was flung back, joining its companion on the ground. The two Heracross that had been held by Gust finally staggered out of the whirlwinds, their shells scratched and battered. Looking at the battlefield, what had started as 4 against 1 had become 2 against 1. One of the Heracross rushed forward for revenge, but it was too late. Its two companions already lay defeated. This Murkrow was far stronger than before. The surprised Heracross collapsed into self-doubt. Murkrow, keep using Gust, then charge and wing attack to finish them. Aoki's ordered again. Having finally tasted what it was like to move without restraint, Murkrow was eager to fight. Letting out a long cry, it spun up 2 whirlwinds to trap the remaining Heracross. Without hesitation, it dove into the middle and unleashed 2 brilliant wing strikes. There were 2 bangs as both Heracross were sent flying from the vortex. The whirlwinds dissipated. "Caw!" Murkrow cried triumphantly. It didn't need to watch the tumbling Heracross. They were clearly out of the fight. Murkrow had never felt such satisfaction since joining Aoki's. Aokis reached out and ruffled Murkrow's proudly raised head. He laughed as he scolded, "That's the result of short-term training. Don't get cocky. Keep working." Murkrow chirped energetically to say it wasn't arrogant, just excited. Aokis grinned and flicked Murkrow's head playfully before picking up the remote control again. "I'm turning the weights back on. Ready?" Murkrow froze. It hadn't finished enjoying the freedom of being unburdened, and now the weights would be reapplied. Still, it trusted Aoki's and nodded reluctantly. Aoki's had seen the reluctance, but knew the unrestrained life wasn't for now. Murkrow still needed to grow stronger. He reactivated the weights. They were the same as before, 10 Jin, about 5 kilograms. Murkrow's body dropped slightly, and its flight height dipped, but it quickly adjusted and leveled with Aoki's. It had long been used to the added weight. A little adjustment was all it took. Aokis's implant gave a passive scan as usual, and he paused. He hadn't expected Murkrow to have leveled up from the battle. Its experience gain was so natural that Murkrow probably thought the boost came from the weight being removed. Aokis decided not to correct it. Letting Murkrow believe the improvement was due to the training would only make it work harder. One advantage of fighting in the wild was that there was no need to clean up a battlefield. The forest had fallen quiet after the commotion. Aokis took Murkrow and continued along the mapped route. That little skirmish had been only an interlude. The real gain was Murkrow's new level. He marched on, checking the landmarks around him against the map so they wouldn't stray. Nearly 4 hours after the Heracross fight, they had pushed almost 30 kilometers deeper into the forest. They had left the outer edge behind and were entering the middle circle. Trees grew larger, trunks thicker, leaves denser, and light barely pierced the canopy. The air got colder, and the gaps Pokémon left were fewer. Traces of weak Caterpie and Weedle were almost gone. Even signs of Pidgey and Spearow fights had vanished. Murkrow's presence no longer kept every creature at bay. Stronger Pokémon claimed this territory, and some took bold interest in the newcomers. At first, Aokis casually collected berries from a tree. He stepped without noticing into the territory of a group of burrowing Pokémon. A Raticate erupted from the ground and lunged at them. The chip couldn't scan underground, so Aokis had no warning. His years of reflexes saved him as he narrowly dodged, but a jagged claw left a deep gouge across his hand. It had been a level 20 Raticate. Its front claws, honed by constant digging, tore into him. If he hadn't moved in time, his hand might have been ruined. Murkrow exploded into action, fury in its cry, and assaulted the Raticate with a barrage of attacks. The Raticate, which had expected an easy meal, was overwhelmed and fell back stunned. Murkrow dispatched the level 20 Raticate easily, but it felt no triumph. Aokis was hurt. Fortunately, Aokis carried plenty of medical supplies. He bit back the pain, cleaned the wound with water, sprayed antiseptic, and wrapped it with gauze. His movements were sure and quiet. He didn't wince. From his previous life, he had learned how to treat injuries well. Being frequently wounded, he'd grown used to this kind of care. Humans were fragile compared to Pokémon. A single mistake could be fatal. And he couldn't rely solely on the implant. The chip's scan range was limited. It gave poor warning for underground or long-range attacks, and it couldn't detect everything. Aoki's thought that defeating the single Raticate would be the end of it. He was wrong. Disturbed by the attack on one of their own, more Raticate burst from the earth, teeth bared and eyes fixed on Murkrow. They would not let the intruder go. Strength in numbers might overwhelm even a strong opponent. Chapter 35, Slowpoke Darkrai, already seething with rage, didn't hold back. It tore through Raticates one after another, and under Aoki's precise commands, the pack kept falling, but more and more Raticates kept swarming out of the underbrush. Realizing something was wrong, Aoki quickly called Darkrai off. This was clearly a nest. If they stayed, they wouldn't get out. Facing such numbers, Aoki chose avoidance. He and his Pokémon ran. The Raticate pack, averaging level 20 and accompanied by a swarm of Rattata, pursued relentlessly. The small Rattata, spry and light, hung on closer, while the dog-sized Raticate were often slowed by the dense bushes underfoot. Seeing that, Aoki angled toward thicker undergrowth. His Team Rocket uniform helped, reducing the damage from thorny branches as he pushed through. Darkrai had no such concerns. The Raticates couldn't match its speed. It flitted ahead, letting loose gusts of wind and dark pulse attacks, turning the pursuing rodents into training targets. Faced with a chase they couldn't win, and watching their numbers dwindle under Darkrai's assaults, the Raticate eventually gave up and burrowed underground to avoid further hits. Aoki only stopped when his lungs burned. He doubled over, hands on his knees, breath ragged as a bellows, heartbeat pounding like a drum. My body is still too weak, he thought. Even though he'd been recovering and training, a long sprint like that nearly left him winded. Blood had seeped through the gauze on his recently bandaged arm. Sweat trickled into the wound and sent sharp stabs of pain through his nerves. Only then did he take in his surroundings. In his haste to shake the pack, he had veered far off the path. If he kept going, he'd leave the map entirely. Somewhere ahead, the clear sound of flowing water drifted through the trees, and a faint mist hung in the air. He had reached the waterfall marked as the furthest point on the map. Aoki decided to rest there. He slowed, tending to his arm and taking a few breathers. Then he pulled a couple of energy cubes from his belt to feed Darkrai, who had used so much stamina on the run. They pushed through a final belt of trees and came out into the valley by the waterfall. The sight stopped Aoki short. Water hammered down in a sheet, the spray rising in a thick curtain of mist. Ancient trees framed the falls, leaves lush and green. Sunlight filtered through, scattering across the spray into small rainbows. Pokémon playing in the shallows scattered at their approach, foraging birds beat away overhead. The little valley that had been lively a moment before fell suddenly quiet. Most of the Pokémon fled, all but one. Sitting motionless on the riverbank, its pink tail trailing in the water, a single Pokémon stared out, unbothered by the humans. It was a Slowpoke. Aoki moved closer. In the mist, the Slowpoke's coloring looked off, paler, almost white-tinged, as if its pink had a white wash through it. Shiny Slowpoke? A faint light blinked in the chip at his temple, and the interface displayed its data. Pokémon Shiny Slowpoke, green fading. Gender, male, level 20. Type, water psychic. Ability, oblivious, held item, none. Egg moves, slack off, rain dance, teleport. Base moves, curse, yawn, tackle, growl, water gun, confusion, disable. Tutor moves, calm mind, Psyshock, none. Green aptitude, and it's actually fading? Aoki's eyes widened. The moveset alone was astonishing. A repository of psychic capability, and teleport among its egg moves made it unusually valuable. With teleport, it could escape or pursue at will. Its psychic potential seemed top tier. The Slowpoke glanced at Aoki and Darkrai with the lazy expression Slowpoke were known for, but it didn't move. It had practiced that blankness for a long time. Ever since it was small, its coloring had set it apart. Other Slowpoke treated it like something rare, and the looks they'd given had made it feel alien. Unlike the rest of its kin, it had been restless and active, always training while they basked, fighting while they napped. That eagerness to fight earned it rejection from the clan. After failed attempts at convincing the leader, it left to try to change itself, to learn how to be a real slowpoke, blank, slow, indifferent. It practiced the slowness until it could fool others. Aoki didn't know any of that. All he saw was a rare, powerful slowpoke, and he decided almost immediately to catch it. Darkrai, go! Say hello to your future partner, Dark Pulse, Aoki said with a grin. Darkrai answered with a caw, eager. It was excited at the thought of a new companion, but ruthless in battle. If a Pokémon couldn't withstand one of its attacks, it wasn't worthy. Black malice coalesced around it, strands of darkness tightening into a crackling sphere. After the morning's training, Darkray's dark pulse had improved noticeably. Slowpoke sensed the gathering dark energy. Dark moves were its least favorite thing. A wash of revulsion passed over it. The feigned blankness slipped like a mask. Its expression sharpened, the sluggishness replaced by a focused glint in its wide eyes. Aoki frowned. This slowpoke really was different. He barely had time to think before Darkray's dark pulse condensed and launched. Years of fighting had taught Slowpoke some hard lessons. It didn't panic. Where others might have frozen, it opened its mouth and fired a concentrated stream of water. A bullet-like water gun aimed straight at Darkrai, bypassing the Dark Pulse's initial shock. Darkray's Dark Pulse hit first, striking the water-psychic hybrid with super-effective force. Slowpoke cried out as the blow landed, but the hit only lit a fiercer fighting spirit in it. The water gun connected as well, slamming into Darkrai mid-release. Darkrai hadn't expected the Slowpoke to trade blows instead of fleeing. It had expected an easy hit, not a stubborn counter. Their exchange exploded into motion, two very different Pokémon, testing each other across the misty riverbank. Aoki once again used the remote to release the restraint on Murkrow. Facing a level 20 Slowpoke with a green aptitude rating, Murkrow couldn't be held back anymore. This time, freed from its bonds, it was calmer than at the start of the fight. Facing Slowpoke, it felt genuine pressure. But no matter how strong Slowpoke might be, its strength lay in Psychic-type moves. For a Dark type like Murkrow, Psychic attacks had never had any effect. That put Slowpoke at an inherent disadvantage. Even so, Slowpoke showed no intention of giving up. It fought on with surprising courage and skill. Even a simple water gun was used with deadly accuracy. Relying on its level advantage and solid build, Slowpoke traded blows with Murkrow. After another exchange, Murkrow was panting heavily while Slowpoke lay on the ground, exhausted and sluggish. Yet its eyes were bright. If you looked closely, you could read excitement, fulfillment, and pure happiness in them. While he directed Murkrow, Aoki kept watching Slowpoke, learning its quirks. He suspected this Slowpoke had come alone for reasons deeper than its coloration. Its personality was a factor. If not for its Slowpoke appearance, Aoki might have mistaken it for some battle-hungry water type. Murkrow, Dark Pulse one more time. Let this future companion rest, Aoki ordered. He could see Slowpoke had already reached its physical limit. A final, amplified Dark Pulse would be enough to stop it. Though tired, Murkrow could still manage another attack. It gathered a practiced Dark Pulse in one breath and sent it at Slowpoke. Slowpoke gritted its teeth and tried to hold on, but it had no strength left to resist. Despite being a higher level, its reliance on psychic moves, which were useless here, meant defeat was inevitable. As it fainted, a fleeting thought crossed its mind. If only the battle could go on forever. That obsession with fighting seemed to define it. The great ball struck as Slowpoke fell and absorbed it. The ball thumped and shook on the ground, its red center flickering wildly. Aoki walked over, watching the great ball tremble, and murmured, "Slowpoke, come with me. There'll be endless battles." After more than 10 seconds, the great ball gave a final thump and went still. The light steadied. Aoki picked it up, and under Murkrow's hopeful stare, opened it. A red glow spilled out and the pale pink Slowpoke reappeared, now conscious. Though injured and unable to move well, its eyes were open. Aoki sat cross-legged on the damp ground and lifted Slowpoke into his lap. Looking into its hesitant, frightened eyes, he said softly, "Don't be afraid, Slowpoke. From now on, we're companions. This is Murkrow. You two fought, but you'll have to get along." "Caw!" Murkrow bobbed its head enthusiastically. It didn't want a newly caught partner to bear any resentment. To Aoki's surprise, Slowpoke showed no hostility toward Murkrow either. If anything, it seemed to like having been challenged. The fight had awakened something in it. Its big round eyes said as much. Yawn, it answered weakly, meaning it didn't mind. Murkrow visibly relaxed and began to circle Slowpoke with curiosity, eager to study this battle-loving companion. Aoki understood and smiled. He pulled a healing spray from his belt, and while Slowpoke yawned softly, sprayed its wounds. The stubborn burn marks left by the Dark-type attack eased a little. Yet on. After the spray, Slowpoke looked up at Aoki with a confused, almost longing expression. It no longer wore the feral look from battle. The shyness in its face was a startling contrast. "You're our companion now. Take care of us," Aoki said, smiling, and produced a pale yellow square energy cube from his belt, the Yellow Berry Energy Cube. Murkrow had used earlier, which could restore some lost aptitude. Yadon! Slowpoke swallowed the intermediate energy cube in one gulp. Its round eyes widened into a blissful stare as a contented sound escaped it. After a few seconds, the days passed, and it realized something had changed. Since it left its group, Slowpoke had been trying to mimic ordinary Slowpokes, and in the process it had lost some of its edge. It had felt like it could only use 8/10 of its strength. After the cube, it seemed closer to 9/10, not back to full power, but a noticeable recovery. "You really like energy cubes, don't you?" Aoki said. "Stop imitating other Slowpokes. Be yourself." Slowpoke met Aoki's steady, unjudging gaze. It couldn't express everything, but it felt the kindness and lack of scorn. It lowered its guard and let its true nature show. Its eyes sharpened. The dullness was gone. For a creature whose eyes were the window to its soul, this change said everything. It no longer suppressed its desire to fight. Aoki smiled. Only by being itself could Slowpoke become who it truly was. If it was different from other Slowpokes, time would tell whether that was right. With the Yellowberry Energy Cube and the Slowpoke's decision to stop pretending, the aptitude slump turned toward recovery. It would need more Yellowberry Energy Cubes for a while, though. Murkrow's remaining supply wasn't enough. Aoki made a note. He'd have to craft more, and perhaps some specialized water psychic cubes tailored to Slowpoke. The crafting chips database had fewer recipes for those combinations, but there were options. "Can you walk?" Aoki asked. "Let's find a place to rest and recover." The Misty Valley was too damp to camp in. Slowpoke was about 1.2 meters long and almost 40 kilograms, not something Aoki could easily carry. It nodded, but didn't move. A faint blue light glowed in its eyes as it focused, a psychic field wrapped around its body. Aoki felt a weight lift from him until there was none at all. Slowpoke floated a few centimeters off the ground. Aoki's eyes brightened. Such strong, precise psychic control was a real treasure. If Slowpoke didn't face Dark-type Pokemon, with this level of psychic power, it would likely dominate others of the same level. Carrying the floating Slowpoke and accompanied by the flying Murkrow, Aoki left the Misty Valley and found a relatively dry, flat spot. After searching longer than before for suitable tinder, he managed to get a fire going by noon and began preparing lunch. Slowpoke couldn't move much and needed energy cubes to continue restoring its aptitude, so Aoki told Murkrow to catch some fish. A meat-rich meal would help Slowpoke recover physically. He set the fish to roast and took the energy cube crafting tools from his belt, tools he hadn't used in a while. He still had plenty of Yellowberry ingredients. Under the curious gazes of Murkrow and Slowpoke, Aoki worked quickly and deftly, molding several intermediate energy cubes. He'd become proficient with the tools. Making these cubes was now routine. He filled the molds with the Yellowberry mixtures and set them aside to solidify. There was enough stock left for Slowpoke to begin taking Yellowberry energy cubes starting today. As the small fire crackled, Aoki watched his two new companions and felt, for the first time in a while, that things were falling into place. It might sound odd, but both of Aomuki's new Pokemon had talent shortcomings that would need energy blocks to correct. Still, talent isn't everything to a trainer. What matters most is a Pokemon's attitude toward battles and training. Diligence can make up for lack of natural talent, up to a point. When talents are close, effort wins the day. When they're worlds apart, talent becomes an impenetrable chasm. So when Aomuki discovered that this Slowpoke, despite a green aptitude, loved battling and had an impressive innate psychic ability, he knew he'd found something special. He wouldn't trade it for an ordinary blue aptitude Pokemon. Murkrow had also grown quickly. After the day's fights, it rose another level to 17, and with Slowpoke at 20, Aomuki finally felt confident exploring the whole forest. Slowpoke's inherited move, Teleport, was another safety net. No matter how strong an opponent, he would always have a way to escape. A rich aroma of roasted fish rose from the campfire. Slowpoke, having never smelled anything like it, twitched its nose and stared at the fish, swallowing hard. What it had long considered bland suddenly smelled incredible with simple seasonings. Its mouth watered. Caw, caw! Murkrow watched Slowpoke's expression and hopped over, gently patting the other Pokemon's head with a wing. It chirped proudly, proud of its trainer and the food they shared. Yadon? Yadon? Slowpoke answered as if asking, "What is this? When can I eat?" Murkrow blinked. It was the one who usually ate and had no idea when the fish would be ready. Aomuki smiled at the two of them, communicating in their own way. He took the roasted fish off the fire and set a basin before them, 3 pieces each. Murkrow started immediately, ignoring the bones with its strong digestive system. Slowpoke stared at the bowl, swallowed, and looked up at Aomuki with big, hopeful eyes. Aomuki ruffled Slowpoke's smooth pink head. "This is for you. Dig in." Since it hatched, Slowpoke had never tasted anything like this, nor had anyone ever been so gentle with it. Tears welled in its huge eyes as it ate faster and faster, finishing its 3 fish even quicker than Murkrow. Murkrow finished too with a happy burp. "All right, full and satisfied," Aomuki said. "Murkrow, let's train. Slowpoke, rest and recover for a while." They intended to stay here a day. There was no time to waste. Murkrow needed steady practice to raise its Dark Pulse proficiency, which would take time and repetition. Slowpoke had just been caught. It shouldn't jump straight into hard training. It needed to recover, not just heal physically, but restore the energies tied to its aptitude, so future energy blocks could do their job. Once its body was back to peak, the blocks would be far more effective. Slowpoke looked longingly at Murkrow, but understood its condition. Even wanting to train wouldn't help if its body couldn't take it. Aomuki smiled and pointed to a boulder roughly the size of a person. "Don't rush. Recover first. If you want to do something, use your psychic power to lift that rock." Although Slowpoke had never trained its psychic powers seriously, the energy was still there. Blue light flowed from its round eyes, and the distant rock trembled, then rose slowly into the air, cradled by a faint aura. If Aomuki hadn't known better, he might have been stunned that a Pokemon with such a strong psychic gift had never practiced. With both Pokemon occupied, Aomuki finally had time to eat and then to prepare a new batch of energy blocks for Slowpoke. After the yellow fruit blocks were finished, he needed to switch to blocks specialized for water and psychic types. He chose Phantom Blue energy blocks for Slowpoke, translucent, pale blue, a little sweet, and designed to boost absorption of water and psychic energies. Making energy blocks was still a painstaking process. He kept using the basic wooden utensils. Anything more specialized would be conspicuous in the Rocket Team's Trial Island base and invite questions. An orphan trainer with oddly sophisticated tools would draw suspicion, so he worked slowly but precisely, letting the quality speak for itself. The chip from his equipment guided every step. Chop, grind, mash, stir, separate. Every movement was deliberate, and the chip notified him when to do the next thing. 2 hours later, he had containers stacked with energy essence, already congealing into intermediate blocks. He only had to wait for them to solidify. During those 2 hours, Murkrow and Slowpoke trained non-stop. Aomuki stopped between batches to coach them, correcting mistakes and steering them away from wasted effort. His previous life as a quasi-elite 4-level trainer wasn't wasted. He'd studied Murkrow extensively back then, and his understanding of psychic and water-type training made guiding Slowpoke straightforward. With Slowpoke's high psychic aptitude, a small nudge was all it needed. As the afternoon wore on, Slowpoke's stamina returned. After a long session of psychic practice, it began adding light physical drills and some water-type moves under Aomuki's supervision. They would press deeper into the forest in the days ahead, but they'd avoid needless fights, and if they met something too strong, Slowpoke's teleport would get them out fast. The afternoon was peaceful in tone, but busy in practice, each of them working toward the same goal: stronger, more capable partners for whatever awaited them in the forest. Boom! Boom! Thunder rolled across the sky, and a jagged streak of lightning split the darkening clouds. A clear blue afternoon had been swallowed by a fast-moving bank of storm clouds. The sun vanished beneath a shroud of slate. The air thickened with humidity, and the first rumbles of thunder made the hairs on Aomori's arms stand up. Slowpoke padded over to him, sensing the change. With one stubby pink paw, it tugged at Aomori's pant leg, making its soft, repetitive noise, yadong, yadong, while pointing to the sky with the other, as if to say the shower coming wouldn't be a drizzle, but a downpour. I know, we should find shelter, Aomori said. The storm had surprised him too, but he understood Slowpoke's warning. He met Slowpoke's gaze. The psychic Pokemon's intentions were always clear to him somehow, part of the almost telepathic connection they'd developed. Murkrow, come on, follow Slowpoke. Let it lead us to cover. Slowpoke's wounds had mostly closed. A pale blue glow flickered in its eyes as it concentrated. For the first time, Aomori saw it use psychic power to lift itself. That little boost made Slowpoke move faster than usual. Leading Aomori and Murkrow, it trotted back toward the waterfall. The air near the falls choked with moisture. Fish and other water Pokemon, starved for oxygen as the pressure changed, began to surface in the pool below. Magikarp, Poliwag, Poliwhirl, Goldeen, Seeking, Wooper, Marill. Aomori's chip pinged soft readings as it scanned them. Most showed red potential, a few orange. He barely glanced at them. He had no interest in catching or training these common specimens right now. Murkrow was the most uncomfortable. Its glossy black feathers clung together with dampness, making each flap heavy and awkward. It flap-preened in disgust, but clattering wings wouldn't get the moisture off. Slowpoke noticed and hurried to the waterfall, jabbed at the curtain of water and chattered, Yadong. Is there a cave behind the falls? Aomori asked. He'd assumed it was an ordinary cascade, but Slowpoke nodded, blue light intensifying in its eyes. With a focused surge of psychic energy, it parted the wall of water, just enough for a person to slip through. If it had been only Slowpoke, it could have squeezed through easily, but it had opened a corridor for Aomori and Murkrow, knowing how much they hated being soaked. Aomori and Murkrow didn't hesitate. They slipped into the curtain. Slowpoke released its hold and let the torrent shove it inside. The waterfall's force simply pressed the little Pokemon in. It bobbed up and hurried along without complaint. Inside the falls, the cave became dry within a few strides. The rock overhang cut off the spray and the damp air of the outside world. Here the humidity faded. Murkrow immediately took advantage, flying circles to speed evaporation from its feathers. Aomori followed Slowpoke deeper, glancing around out of habit and curiosity. From the way Slowpoke moved, this seemed to be a place it had used often, perhaps its home, which explained why the Slowpoke had first found the path here. As the rain began in earnest, the roar of the fall blended with thunder, turning the wilderness into a thunderous orchestra. The downpour freshened the air and stirred the water Pokemon into motion. Aomori stepped to the edge of the cave and peered through the curtain. Through the blurred glass of falling water, he could just make out activity outside. Slowpoke pushed a small gap in the curtain again so he could get a clearer look. The scene on the pond surprised him. Along with Magikarp and Goldeen, there were rarer species moving through the shallows. A slender, exquisitely scaled body flashed in the rain, 2 long whiskers, a broad fan-like tail that shimmered with color. Melodic, Aomori breathed. He'd never expected to see one in the wild. Melodic, the evolved form of Phoebus, required a prism scale to evolve, an item so rare that wild Melodic were practically unheard of. In Aomori's mind, Melodic were the stuff of trainers' dreams, not wild ponds. He felt the urge to rush out and try to catch it, but the thought vanished almost as fast as it arrived. In this downpour, without knowing Melodic's level or temperament, any rash action could mean disaster for him and his Pokemon. It wasn't worth the risk. Besides Melodic, something else caught his eye. Small, armored turtles slipping through the reeds. Squirtle. Wild starter Pokemon. Aomori frowned and then smiled faintly. A colony of wild Squirtle meant this place was special. Starter Pokemon were normally controlled by the Alliance. Wild colonies were rare, and if their existence became known, the Alliance would send forces to secure them. But this territory belonged to Rocket Team influence, beyond Alliance control for now, so pockets like this could still survive. If he had luck after the rain, Aomori thought, he might hunt for the Squirtle colony and possibly catch a starter with decent potential. Having already added Slowpoke to his team, he felt less anxious about resources and more open to opportunities. At worst, if this path failed, he could return to Pokemon hunting with the boost the chip gave him. The peace shattered in an instant. A brutal roar tore across the lake, a sound that made every Pokemon freeze. Water exploded upward as a colossal shape burst from the pool. A Gyarados erupted from the depths, its jaws wide and eyes blazing with fury. The Intimidate aura rolled outward and scattered the other Pokemon. Melodic surged forward, pushing between the others and the Gyarados, calling out a pleading cry of alarm. But Gyarados ignored it. Whatever had disturbed its rest had set it into a blind, savage temper. It needed battle. Gold sheen gathered in Gyarados' maw, a harsh yellow light coalescing into a single, devastating beam. The monster unleashed a hyper beam that cut through the rain like a knife. Melodic reacted instantly. Faster in the water, it flung itself ahead of the other Pokemon, using a wall of water to intercept the blast. Water cloaked its body as it took the hyper beam, bracing to shield the rest from the attack. Chapter 39, The Might of Golduck. Please collect and recommend. Before Aoki could take in much, the battle between Melodic and Gross drifted farther downriver, the commotion shrinking until it was only a distant light show of hyper beam and columns of hydro pump through the trees. Phew, what a terrifying fight. Thank goodness I didn't try to catch that Melodic. From the looks of it, both Pokemon must be above level 40, Aoki murmured, still awed. As the two Titans left, the frightened wild Pokemon slipped back into hiding. The once bustling lake fell silent, leaving only the steady rain. Aoki told Slowpoke to release its hold on the waterfall and retreated deeper into the cave to sit, waiting for the rain to ease. The fight had lit something in him. I want to reach that level of battle. Then I won't be at the mercy of others. Looking at Murkrow, nearly dry now, and Slowpoke, who had stayed by his side, he made a quiet promise. In this life, I won't abandon you. Half an hour later, the heavy rain eased. With Slowpoke's help, Aoki stepped out from behind the waterfall. Everything in the forest was still soaked, but glistening with beads of water and sunlight breaking through the clouds, the place felt renewed. Walking across the wet grass, Aoki, Murkrow, and Slowpoke left the lake area. He had planned to rest here for a day to let Slowpoke recover and to finish making some Pokeblocks, but the downpour had interrupted that. Fortunately, Slowpoke had recovered well, and the Pokeblocks were already made. They simply needed time to harden. Taking advantage of the clearer weather, Aoki followed the river with Murkrow and Slowpoke, hoping to find the Squirtle he'd spotted before. He figured there might be a small colony nearby. The recent rains had swollen the river and submerged the usual animal paths, so they stuck to the grass. By the time his pant legs were soaked, the clear water below often revealed water-type Pokemon. But most of them were common, Magikarp everywhere, the occasional Goldeen. He sighed inwardly, then let it go. Starter Pokemon were rare. It was a surprise to see any in the wild, and trying to catch one would come down to luck. He walked over 10 kilometers without a sign of Squirtle. A few rarer water types passed by, but with Slowpoke in his party, Aoki wasn't interested in average, middling Pokemon. They weren't worth wasting resources on. Finding Slowpoke was lucky enough, he thought. Being able to catch one with such potential left him satisfied. Searching for Squirtle had been a whim. It would be great to find one, but not finding one wouldn't be the end of the world. The sky gradually darkened. One more stretch, then we'll head back, he told himself. But before he could go further, the unexpected forced him to turn around. A flash of blue burst from the river and landed not far ahead of them, water streaming off its body. Golduck, Aoki frowned. He hadn't seen it during the storm. Psyduck had been scarce through the rain, and now here was a Golduck suddenly appearing from the water. Murkrow hopped forward protectively, and Slowpoke crawled up to Aoki. The instincts of a fellow water type whispered that this Golduck was very strong, extremely strong. Aoki's vision flickered and a data chart popped up in his mind. Pokemon Golduck, yellow. Gender, male, level 38, type water, ability, damp, held item, neg moves, mud bomb, yawn. Basic moves, Aqua Jet, Water Sport, Scratch, Tail Whip, Water Gun, Confusion, Fury. Swipes, Water Pulse, Disable, Screech, Zen Headbutt, Aqua Tail, Soak, Self-Suggest. TMTR moves, Hydro Pump, Iron Tail, Ice Punch. None. Aoki's face hardened. A level 38 Golduck. What luck. He had assumed that after the brutal clash between Gyarados and Milotic, no other powerful Pokémon would be around, so he'd been boldly searching for starters. He hadn't expected the true ruler of this stretch of water to appear. What Aoki didn't know was that this Golduck had been hiding during the fight. The passing Gyarados and Milotic were only travelers. They were far too powerful for the Golduck to challenge, so it had kept its Psyduck clan hidden. Once the two left and the coast seemed clear, the Golduck surfaced and immediately saw Aoki and his group lingering in its territory. Fury flared. It could never take on those two giants, but did these small creatures dare challenge its domain? Golduck's eyes narrowed with contempt. As the area's dominant Pokémon, it could judge strength and found the trio inexperienced and weak, despite their bright eyes and aura. It didn't bother with insignificant opponents usually, but it needed to reassert its authority now. Water surged into its mouth as it charged a powerful attack. Aoki's mouth twitched. Must it be that aggressive right away? Charging up just to blast them? He barely had time to think before he barked. Slowpoke, teleport, let's go. Yadon, Slowpoke responded. Psychic energy gathered in its pale eyes, and a blue wave enveloped Aoki, Murkrow, and Slowpoke. Golduck, who had psychic sensitivity of his own, sensed the movement and abandoned its charge. Instead, it fired its strongest water move immediately, Hydro Pump. A thick jet of water the size of a person shot from Golduck's mouth and barreled toward them. Murkrow, protect, Aoki shouted. Pale green energy snapped into being around Murkrow. The crow thrust everything into defending as the shield expanded and took the full force of the Hydro Pump. Slowpoke, hurry. The protect spell wouldn't hold long, but Hydro Pump kept blasting under Golduck's aim. Slowpoke braced and pushed its psychic power beyond its usual limits. The blue light in its eyes surged, the mysterious energy wave wrapped around them and intensified. With a final effort, the psychic pulse reached its peak, and Aoki, Murkrow, and Slowpoke vanished from Golduck's sight. The Hydro Pump smashed into the ground where they had been moments before and punched a crater 3 meters across. Golduck spat water and gaped at the empty spot, its face hard with cold fury. Its authority had been challenged, and it wanted blood. But the memory of the human's eyes at the moment of teleportation sent an inexplicable chill through it. For a moment it felt unsettled, and then, abandoning the search, it splashed back into the river and disappeared beneath the surface. The three reappeared in the cave behind the waterfall. Murkrow stumbled, dragging its wings as Protect faded, while Slowpoke collapsed, spent. Aoki shook his head to clear the dizziness from teleport and looked at them grimly. If Slowpoke hadn't been here, we'd have been finished. There are a lot of powerful Pokémon in this forest. He helped Murkrow up, fed it some Pokéblocks, and told it to rest at the cave's edge. Then he turned to the exhausted Slowpoke. Slowpoke, use Meditate to restore your psychic energy. Yadon, Slowpoke whined softly, closed its eyes, and began to meditate. A faint psychic shimmer surrounded it. Outside of battle, Meditate served not only to raise special attack and special defense, but also as a training method to deepen and replenish psychic ability. After making sure Darkrai and Slowpoke were settled, Aoki sank back against the cool cave wall. This had been a true unprovoked disaster, just a walk by the river, and they'd run into a powerful regional overlord. Both Pokémon had taken heavy hits. Still, for someone who had spent a previous life exploring wild territories, being ambushed and driven out of another creature's domain wasn't new. Don't look so down. It's just a few more setbacks. Train hard and we'll get our revenge, Aoki told them. Hearing his confidence, Darkrai and Slowpoke gradually calmed, letting frustration turn into fuel. We must get stronger and take that revenge. They wanted to start training right away, but both were still injured. Aoki ordered them to rest until they healed. So that night the cave under the waterfall held only the sound of falling water and the soft crackle of the campfire. Darkrai leaned against the rock, eyes closed, methodically digesting energy cubes. Eat, absorb, repeat. Energy cubes auto-absorbed after consumption, but one could speed absorption by quickening the flow of internal elemental energy. Slowpoke lay nearby, eyes shut as mysterious psychic energy swirled around it until the space itself shimmered with tiny ripples. Aoki watched them work. His Pokémon were eager to improve. As their trainer, he could only support them and plan the best training and growth paths. If he could make high-grade energy cubes, their growth rates would skyrocket. Finding the tools for that would be a headache, but an essential responsibility. Darkray's development path was clear. An agile assassin with low HP and defense. Weighted daily training would eventually push its speed into the stratosphere. Slowpoke's evolution was a tougher choice. It could become either Slowbro, a physically defensive tank, or Slowking, a special defense and psychic specialist. Aoki hadn't decided yet. Slowpoke's slow build, stamina, and exceptional psychic talent made Slowking the more logical fit. Focus on offense and special defense. Don't bother with heavy physical bulk. But if Slowpoke wanted Slowbro, Aoki would support that too. He couldn't force a direction. The choice had to be theirs together. The cave was especially cool that night. Aoki sat before the fire, thinking while his Pokémon rested and repaired themselves. In the morning, he finally told them to keep resting. Sometimes the body's natural recovery was best. Morning training was as relentless as always, but Darkrai worked harder than usual. Yesterday's defeat still stung. Slowpoke couldn't do physical drills yet, but its psychic power had improved dramatically after yesterday's overloaded use of teleport. Where it had previously been able to lift only one training stone at a time, now it could lift 2. Aoki was astonished. The sudden gain was too big to ignore. He thought of Slowpoke's psychic energy as a cup of water. Before the overload, it had been using a hair-thin straw. After, the straw's diameter had doubled and the flow multiplied. Seeing Slowpoke improve pushed Darkrai to train even harder. He knew his loss had come partly from Slowpoke's psychic moves being ineffective and partly from Aoki's command, but he also knew Slowpoke's overall combat power was likely double his own. Darkrai wasn't jealous, he was determined. He wouldn't be a decoration if stronger Pokémon joined them. As Aoki's first catch, he had pride. He needed to become the team's strongest protector. Aoki trained alongside them. Training together kept their spirits aligned. 3 hours flew by, and then Aoki remembered the mission from Shadow. Finishing it would deepen his standing with Shadow, and the 10,000 points reward would help more than anything right now. Raising 2 Pokémon doubled resource consumption. The cost was staggering. He hadn't spent little on Darkrai by luck. He made his own energy cubes. Ordinary trainers couldn't do that. For reference, an intermediate energy cube was worth 5 points on Team Rocket's exchange list. Darkrai ate about 30 cubes a day, which meant 150 points daily just for him. Add Slowpoke and the tally shot up. Skills cost even more. Teaching Darkrai 3 techniques had already cost Aoki over 10,000 points, and he would need many more. That was why ordinary trainers stagnated. Without opportunities, the resources to raise even one Pokémon could take a lifetime to gather, and by then the Pokémon would be past their prime. Aoki had relied on the chip. In his previous life, even with that help, he'd become a Pokémon hunter and taken Team Rocket allocations to reach quasi-Elite 4 level. That status was only mid to upper rank inside Team Rocket, though. The Alliance hid countless masters. Only being an Elite 4 level trainer gave a person even a little freedom in the world. Even that didn't make you one of the actual Elite 4. There was a big difference. When he stepped out of the waterfall cave, the storm from yesterday had cleared. Warm sunlight washed over him like sweet water to a thirsty throat. The swollen river had receded overnight. The pebbles by the lake glinted clean in the sun. Aoki looked out at the river and said quietly to Darkrai and Slowpoke, "Next time we come here, it'll be for revenge." "Ka! Yadon!" Their cries answered him in unison. The vow settled into all of them. Revenge was their goal, and they would train until they could claim it.